to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Congratulations to Nigel Farage, voted by you as the nation's best news presenter at the prestigious Trick Awards.
It's 3 p.m. It's Patrick Christys. Is GB News. Is the NHS a religious cult? It is 75 years old today, and our political leaders decided to go to church and say a prayer for it. In other news, we're going to be talking about this. More cash for refugees. The latest opinion polling has dropped, and get a load of this. The British public think that immigration is too high. In fact, even Remainers do. Shock horror. I'm also going to be banging on a lot about this. Idiots in Scotland decided to boo the King. We will have a flyover during our time on air as well. You lucky, lucky people. We'll try our best to take that live. And Mick Lynch is going to be on at some point, but we found a rare point of agreement with Mick Lynch. I'm actually really looking forward to this chat because we've got a Don't Kill Cash campaign, and apparently they're going to do away with ticket offices that accept cash at train stations. And this impacts, of course, predominantly the elderly. And we can't have that, can we? Patrick Christys, GB News. Yes, there we go. Look, straightforward today. Do you think the NHS is a cult? Does it need urgent reform? Of course, happy birthday, our beloved NHS. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Hello, good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 1 minute past 3. Play has been suspended on Court 18 at Wimbledon after 2 protesters threw confetti and a jigsaw on the grass. Some spectators booed as the activists ran onto the court. The group says it targeted the tennis tournament because it signed a sponsorship deal with Barclays Bank. In a statement, Just Stop Oil said, "We can't leave it to the next generation to pick up the pieces." Earlier today, meanwhile, security staff at Harrods also removed a group of protesters. Just Stop Oil were pictured holding placards on an escalator in the luxury department store. Video posted to the group's Twitter account shows staff evicting a photographer. It's the latest in what have become almost daily stunts as the group calls for the government to end new fossil fuel licences. The King is at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, where he's being presented with the Honours of Scotland, the country's crown jewels. As part of the coronation celebrations, King Charles will receive a crown, sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems. The Prince and Princess of Wales, known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland, are among those present at the event, as are the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. The NHS has been described as a treasured national institution as it celebrates 75 years. But Labour is warning the health service will die without further investment and modernisation. A record 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. Party leaders, along with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, are among those attending a special service at Westminster Abbey, paying tribute to staff. Earlier, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, told us the NHS is facing the worst crisis in its history, and people who can't afford to go privately are being left behind.
I'm deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Well, Health Minister Maria Caulfield, who is also a nurse, says strike action is putting more pressure on the service.
Although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
There's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voice their concerns, saying it'll impact vulnerable people and will lead to job losses. A decision on which offices will be closed will be made after a consultation process. Schools across England have been forced to close or restrict access to students, with teachers walking off the job in a row over pay. It's their 7th strike this year, and unions have warned there'll be more action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. As well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are also being disrupted. Birmingham teacher Leslie Quinlan says both staff and students deserve better.
Government aren't listening, and we're going to keep doing this until they do. We need to have a fully funded education system in this country. These children deserve so much better than this. What this government is happening, what it's doing to them. It's been going on for way too many years. We need to put a stop to it now and fund their education.
The Captain Tom Foundation has halted donations and payments following a charity watchdog investigation. It comes as planning bosses order the demolition of an unauthorised building in Captain Tom's daughter's home. Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband applied for permission to build a Captain Tom Foundation building in the grounds of their home in Bedfordshire in 2021. An additional application for a building containing a spa and pool was refused by planning authorities. This is GB News. More headlines from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
The NHS is a cult. There, I said it, it's a toe-curling religious cult. Just look at the absolute state of what our political leaders did today. They literally worshipped at the altar of our beloved NHS. They didn't attend PMQ so they could go to a church service at Westminster Abbey to mark its 75th birthday. They were reading Sunak from Matthew. Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me food. Sir Keir Starmer, reading from Revelation. See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Never has the phrase Jesus wept been more appropriate. A nurse who delivered the first vaccine out of a clinical trial carried the George Cross into the Abbey in a procession. The government will light buildings up in blue. Starmer has written about what it means for his family. Health Secretary Steve Barclay called it our most treasured national possession, or whatever he said. Happy birthday, dysfunctional, inanimate public service. What a sickening load of rubbish. I look forward to Westminster Abbey being packed to the rafters to celebrate the birthday of HMRC, where people with offshore bank accounts are ritualistically flogged before a giant crucifix. Cash-in-hand tradesmen are made to wear a crown of thorns and repent before the Holy Father. Bankers march towards the altar, where they are greeted with a Turin shroud-style cloth with Jeremy Hunt's face on it. Good God, give me strength. Give me strength. Let's get school children to write letters to the NHS thanking them for allowing them to be born. Everybody this evening can light a candle and put it in their window after they've taken part in the state-mandated hour-long clapathon on the streets of Britain. If you walk past anybody today who works in our beloved NHS, bow down before them, spread the palm leaves in their path, wash their feet with holy water and say, praise ye, for ye have cometh to rid the world of sickness and embrace us in your eternal light. Meanwhile, in the real world, England's under-pressure NHS is reportedly facing a record bill for future medical negligence claims. The amount which will be needed to settle these claims has risen, reportedly, by 52% in a year to an astonishing 128.2 billion quid, more or less the entire annual budget of the NHS. Workers are out on strike every flipping week. People are leaving in their droves to go to Australia, which, and I know this is radical, has a better, more modern system. How are those record waiting times doing? Anyone? I will take inspiration now from our political leaders today and finish with a short prayer. Dear Lord, please bless us with politicians who have the balls to radically reform the National Health Service to stop us dying needlessly, because right now they're too busy pretending to worship it to actually fix this broken mess. Well, I want to hear from you on this. GBviews at gbnews.com. Let's speak immediately to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, who is outside St Bart's in London, which is the UK's oldest hospital. Tom, join me in a chorus of happy birthday to begin with, of course. It's only fitting. But, yes, the NHS is 75 today, and our politicians decided to pray for it.
They did indeed. It feels rather apt, actually, here outside St Bart's, a hospital that's almost 1,000 years old since its foundation. 1123 AD was the year that St Bart's came to be as a hospital, albeit it was only nationalised 75 years ago, along with all the other hospitals in the land in the inception of the NHS. But it does feel apt here, because while St Bart's is behind me, I'm in the shadow of St Paul's Cathedral, which is just down the road over there. So perhaps this religious service is more apt than one might think. But it is an interesting day to have, to look back on the last 75 years, to see the original vision of the NHS, which was, to some extent, world-leading in the time it was introduced. It wasn't the first country in the world to deliver universal healthcare, but it did it in a very comprehensive way. Of course, Prussia did a form of universal healthcare in the late 1800s, Norway in the early 1900s, the United Kingdom in 1948. We were among the first to deliver universal healthcare, and the United Kingdom has always felt like that is a sort of a mantle to hold, something that is quite unique and quite special. Although, of course, in the intervening 75 years, just about every other country, developed country, I should say, in the world, has delivered some form or other of universal healthcare, with the notable exception being the United States. But it does seem somehow to have escaped a lot of the realm of political debate, that indeed there are other countries now that do also deliver universal healthcare, whether it be Germany, France, the Netherlands, Australia, Canada, all the rest of them. I'm not sure that any of them have delivered a religious service for their universal system of healthcare.
No, absolutely. And shame on them. Shame on them for not praising the NHS as a deity. Just in terms of our beloved NHS, there are a few other systems out there that are now outperforming it. And Wes Streeting, I noticed quite a while ago now, said we stop we need to stop treating the NHS like a religion. Then Keir Starmer pops up at church, of course, and treats it like a religion. But just talk to me about some of the alternative systems that are out there, because at the moment, I don't think it's working for the patients. It clearly isn't working for the staff that are in there, given that they feel underpaid and undervalued, and to some extent they obviously are. And I just want to know what alternatives there are, really.
Well, there are lots of different ways in which you can deliver universal healthcare. I think the starting point for any discussion about this would be almost universally agreed amongst the people of the United Kingdom, which is it must be a system that covers everyone. No one wants to go down the American route of leaving people without cover and giving people huge bills if they go to hospital. That is a system that no one in the world, well, so no one in the United Kingdom would want to see. But I think that what is sometimes missing in this conversation, and it's something that Sajid Javid, the former Health Secretary, has been alluding to in the last few days as well. There aren't only two systems of healthcare in the world. It's not just the United States and the United Kingdom. There are lots of countries, particularly European countries, that deliver universal healthcare, often free at the point of use, but do it in a different way. Perhaps one example that feels closer to home, even though it's the other side of the world, is Australia, where indeed lots of NHS practitioners are thinking of moving to, because they do pay their medical professionals a lot better than we do in this country. One of the reasons they do isn't that there's more taxpayer money going into the Australian health system. In fact, on a per-person basis, there is less money going into the Australian health system from taxpayers. Where the difference comes is that if you're a wealthy Australian, you're likely to have private insurance. Indeed, there is a surcharge added to Australians' tax bills. If they earn above 90,000 Australian dollars, they have a penalty if they don't take out their own private insurance. And so there's a much more competitive market and much more of rich people, frankly, putting money into that system as well voluntarily.
Absolutely, Tom, thank you very much. Great way to kick off the show. Tom Harwood there, GB News' Deputy Political Editor. Now, I am joined, very gratefully so, by Naomi Berry, who is an NHS practice nurse. Naomi, thank you very, very much. Is our beloved NHS working for you?
Oh, no, not really. It's crazy, it's busy, it's understaffed, and it's really hard work.
I absolutely, 100%. Look, would you support some kind of reform? I mean, how do you feel, right? How do you feel, genuinely, as someone who works in the NHS pretty much every single day, I imagine? How do you feel about politicians standing up an altar and saying a prayer, but not actually really doing a huge amount to maybe fix some of the problems?
Not really helping us on the front line, not giving us the staff, not giving us the money to be able to do the job that we need to do. So not the best stance that they could take today.
OK, all right. And so the NHS has slipped from apparently the world's best healthcare system to the fourth in a survey of the 11 wealthiest countries in the world. So we are fourth out of 11. It came only ninth in a comparison of healthcare outcomes, including things like early deaths, cancer survival, baby deaths at birth, which actually we are particularly bad on, apparently, for some reason. So what needs to be done? I mean, would you be in favour of, I don't know, I mean, like rich people maybe paying and taking the pressure off the NHS? That's an option that people are floating. Tony Blair's even piped up about that today.
I mean, it could be an option. It could be an option like you've just been talking about Australia, where they have that people pay a certain amount for private healthcare. Maybe that is an option we need to think about. There's never going to be the right answer, is there, Patrick? No one's going to ever agree that this is what should be done. But to access healthcare for those that can't access it at the moment, that specifically really need it, then maybe that is a route that they look at.
Have you thought about moving abroad?
Yeah, I've got a cousin who's an enrolled nurse in Australia.
And what's it like over there for them?
She's very happy. She's very happy with her hours. She's happy with the wage. As an enrolled nurse, which is below my banding where I am, she earns more than I do and she does less hours.
Right. Yes. OK. I mean, it is almost like other countries have a more functional health system, isn't it, really? But happy birthday, NHS, though. When you look at the situation that you're in now, look, you obviously do an incredible job. You work incredibly hard, incredibly long hours, very stressful, saving lives. You must see some horror shows as well as some good things as well. Can I just ask for something a little bit positive? I mean, what is the best thing about the NHS for you? What's the best thing about your job?
Do you know what? I can advocate for patients. And I said this morning in a TikTok video that I did, make every contact count. We may be the only person that patient sees all week. So make it count and it's fine.
OK, lovely. I mean, I certainly do hope that if I am ever sick, that I kind of come to after a concussion or something and see you standing there. I would feel definitely in safe hands. Look, I've got to ask you this. I understand it might be a bit tricky for you to answer it, but I hope you appreciate it. I do have to ask it. We know that it's being run quite badly politically. We know that, you know, there's issues when it comes to, you know, money, etc. And I know that a lot of staff feel underpaid and undervalued. A lot of the taxpayers out there think, well, look, we are pumping like billions and billions of pounds into the NHS. Is that money being well managed from within? Do you think some of the higher-ups at the NHS are doing enough, or are we just blaming politicians here?
Yeah, that's really hard because we don't know what happens above in the kind of ivory tower. We're not quite sure, but maybe that is an area that needs to be looked at, is what happens above and can we put any of that cash flow further down?
Yeah, I think that's possibly something that there should be more transparency on as well, Naomi, because, you know, we have chats like this, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, our politicians, I mean, right across the board, I would argue pretty much anything that politicians touch at the moment does not end particularly well. So I can completely buy the fact they're not doing that well for the NHS. I understand that, but I think there has to be a bit more transparency as well of like, right, we are all paying this amount for the NHS. Is that money being well spent and well distributed as well? But I just wonder whether or not our politicians are just a bit too afraid to enact the kind of reform that we would need. And then I see them all at a church service today and I think, yeah, they probably are a little bit afraid to do that because they have created a bit of a religion. But Naomi, look, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for everything that you do and for coming on and speaking so openly and honestly, and good luck to you. I hope that things get resolved to your satisfaction. It's Naomi Berry there, who is an NHS practice nurse. Now, we are going to be returning to our beloved NHS throughout the course of this show, but get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. And talking of an online facility, gbnews.com is the fastest growing national website in the country. There's loads of this on there, big analysis, big opinion, loads of breaking news as well. Talking of breaking news, Wimbledon's been disrupted. I'm hoping that in a little bit anyway, I'm going to be able to show you what Just Stop Oil have been up to, maybe even speak to a very special guest as well, so stay tuned for that. But as many of you already know, GB News is campaigning to stop the UK becoming a cashless society. The campaign is called Don't Kill Cash, and it's proving to be remarkably popular. So far, more than 112,000 people have signed the petition, which is a remarkable effort, so thank you very much. More and more retailers are choosing to only accept card payments, and it's the vulnerable people, isn't it, genuinely? It's the elderly people, it's all of those people who rely on cash, and they're being left behind. 5.4 million adults still rely on cash. It's used in 6 billion transactions every single year, but strong vested interest, they're pushing for it to be permanently replaced, and we think that is a bad thing. And we're even going to be talking about a story today about it, aren't we? Which is that now ticket offices at train stations where you can pay in cash potentially are going to be shut. I have the one and only Mick Lynch off of the RMT on, and I am genuinely really looking forward to that conversation. We found a point of agreement between myself and Mick Lynch. It's going to be a good chat, I think. But anyway, yes, if you care about not killing cash, then please do sign our petition. That petition to prevent a cashless society. It's on our website, gbnews.com/cash, or if you've got a smartphone, use it to click on the QR code that if you're watching us on TV or online, you will see on your screens right now. It'll take you to the petition. Tell your mates, get all over it, and hopefully we can affect the law. Help GB News with our campaign. Let's not kill cash. Don't kill cash. Now, Justin Welby is at it again. He's criticised the government's crucial illegal migration bill. A couple of points for me on this. Should religious leaders be sticking their nose in politics? But secondly, the latest opinion polling has dropped. I can't wait to reveal to you exactly what's in it. But even Remainers think that immigration is too high. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The 12th, a day to celebrate history, community and family here in Northern Ireland. Join me, Arlene Foster.
And me, Dougie Beattie, as we bring you live coverage of the July 12th celebrations from the beautiful city of Belfast.
And right across the United Kingdom. It's all happening here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hundreds of railway station ticket offices face closure, and with it the ability to pay using cash. We obviously here are campaigning to don't kill cash. I'll be talking about that very, very shortly. And yes, the moment you've all been waiting for. We will cross live to Edinburgh, where the King and Queen have been targeted by protesters. We're also hoping we might get a little flyover as well. Does anyone ever ask the question, why aren't this lot at work? You know? But anyway, Justin Welby has once again hit out at the government's illegal migration bill. In a letter to The Times, the Archbishop of Canterbury, along with Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Jewish and Sikh religious leaders, wrote that Britain must have an asylum system based on justice and compassion. That is all very well and good, Mr. Archbishop, and thank you very much for that. My concern is that we now have a chap there who is trying to put forward his own policies. And if you want to do that, then you can stand for election and produce a manifesto and see whether or not anyone votes for it, just on the chance of people voting for it as well. The latest round of YouGov polling asked people if they think that immigration has been too high in the UK. 61% of Tories think it is, 40% of Labour voters, and get this, 44% of Remainers think that immigration is too high. That is up 15% on this time last year. So, yeah, by the time you factored in the about rights and don't knows, actually very few people think that it's too low. But the government says the illegal migration bill will help them tackle the small boats crisis. but the bill suffered 11 defeats in the House of Lords on Monday. I am joined now by Reverend Calvin Robinson. Calvin, thank you very, very much, quite literally of this parish, as it were. Calvin, should we just keep religion out of what's going on in the Channel?
The problem is that religion is political, and religious leaders do have a duty to input some moral authority, and the reason we have bishops in the House of Lords, for example, is to provide a moral compass for our legislative. That's the reason they're there. However, they're crossing a line at the moment, and they're becoming party political. They're becoming partisan. And we're seeing Justin Welby opposing Conservative government policy as if he is the opposition. That's not what they're supposed to be doing. So they're crossing a line there. But when he says this is about justice and compassion, well, that's exactly what this bill is about. Justice in terms of cutting down on illegal immigration. We have plenty of legal routes for migration, including for refugees. You know, I've always wondered why people are keen to pay £5,000 to people smugglers when they could pay £50 for a ticket and come straight over and go to the embassy.
Yeah,
but also
absolutely.
Compassion. There's compassion there, Patrick, for the lives of people that are at risk from crossing the border illegally in those little dinghies.
Yeah, well, one thing that he wants, and he's very keen on this, is us to throw our arms around the world. And this is really the kind of key detail that he's trying to get our government to enact, which is a global refugee long-term plan. But from where I'm sitting, we already have a long-term plan, which is to let everyone in and let them live here long-term.
Yeah, well, indeed. He said the government needs a 10-year plan. And the government, well, the Conservatives have been in power for 13, 14 years now. So this has been a 10-year plan, and it hasn't worked. And of course, I agree with him on something. We do need to have a forward-thinking, long-term provision for, or some kind of bill to protect the borders of this country. We need to work on something. But in the meantime, in the short term, we need to stop people from taking risks with people smugglers. We need to cut down on illegal immigration and the gangs and the drug trafficking and all that that's going on. We need to make sure that people who come in this country can be vetted. So we're protecting their lives and we're protecting British citizens' lives at the same time. And for the Archbishop of Canterbury to be against that shows a lack of compassion, actually. And what's interesting, Patrick, is he's so keen to talk on this issue. Where was he 2 weeks ago when we had a massive debate on abortion? Where is he to protect the sanctity of life, a core Christian tenet? I did not see him in the public square then, but I see him now in the Houses of Parliament discussing what is a partisan issue.
There is also, I think, the quite deep-seated irony that he appears to be more than willing to welcome in loads of people who are, of course, not Christian, which, as the head of the Church of England, is an interesting point, I think, that's worth noting. I worry, and I say this as a religious person, Calvin, I worry that sometimes religion can be used potentially to silence opposition. I look at the latest round of opinion polling from YouGov and the amount of people who think that this is legal immigration, net migration, is too high. And then people might then look at this collection of religious figures who are essentially saying the opposite and think, oh, well, you know, maybe I'm ungodly now for thinking that I want to stop the boats. And I worry about that, really, whether it buys silence.
Yeah, they're politicizing the faith, they're moralizing, and they're making it seem like this is the only way that you can be faithful. You know, to be a good Christian, you have to believe in open borders. That's absolute nonsense, actually. I could show scripture references that provide that borders are God ordained and that nations and tribes are part of God's plan, and therefore protecting one's family, protecting one's nation first and foremost is important, so that you can then go out and give charity to other nations and other peoples. And you know, people twist scriptures all the time and say, well, there's elements of the sojourner, you know, the traveller coming to your country, you should look after them. Of course, you should look after a traveller that comes to your country. That doesn't mean you should allow them to stay. You know, we have to look at this pragmatically and, of course, with justice and compassion, but we cannot use the faith to be party political as the Archbishop of Canterbury and his Liberal friends are doing.
Calvin, thank you very much, as ever. Reverend Calvin Robinson there, of course, also a fabulous GB News presenter. Now, loads more still to come between now and 4 p.m. It is all action today. We've got the latest on the King and Queen's visit to Edinburgh, where Republican protesters, who clearly don't have a job, have been out in force. And Just Stop Oil protesters have once again endeared themselves to the British public. Take a look at this. So you're watching Wimbledon, there it is. And oh, they're on the court, and they've been throwing jigsaw pieces, and they've been what looks like puke as well. Anyway, Wimbledon, the play has been halted, so just keep watching GB News instead. But now it's your headlines with Tamsin.
Patrick, thank you. Here are the headlines at 3:32. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested after disrupting play at Wimbledon. The match on court 18 was briefly suspended after they threw environmentally friendly confetti and a jigsaw on the grass. The group says it targeted the tennis tournament because of a sponsorship deal with Barclays Bank, which has given £30 billion to oil and gas companies over the past 2 years. In a statement, Just Stop Oil said, "We can't leave it to the next generation to pick up the pieces." Celebrations are continuing in Edinburgh after the King was presented with the country's crown jewels, the honours of Scotland. As part of the coronation ceremony, King Charles received a crown, sceptre and a sword made of gold, silver and gems. The Prince and Princess of Wales, known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland, are among those present and at the event, as are the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. The NHS has been described as a treasured national institution as it celebrates 75 years. But Labour is warning the health service will die without further investment and modernisation. A record 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged the figure could get worse before it gets better. Party leaders, along with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh again, were among those to attend a special service at Westminster Abbey, paying tribute to staff. There's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest locations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it'll impact vulnerable people and will lead to job losses. Well, you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2726 and €1.1687. The price of gold is £1,512 and 43 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,446 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for physical investment.
In Scotland, protesters upset royal fans hoping to get a glimpse of the King at the coronation procession in Edinburgh. Republican groups chanted "Not My King" to counter shouts of "God Save the King." And the King and Queen have taken part in a ceremony at St Giles's Cathedral marking the coronation in Scotland today. I always wonder with these people, why haven't you got a job? Really? I mean, it must be amazing, mustn't it, to just be able to go take the devil. Imagine saying to your boss, "Sorry, I can't come in today. What are you going to do? I'm just going to go to the cathedral and shout at the King." You know, you'd get sacked, wouldn't you? But there we go. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, has been in Edinburgh all day. We are hoping for a little bit of good news at some point, Cameron, which may or may not include a flyover, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But, yeah, protests. I mean, what went on?
Yeah, well, there are 300 or so anti-monarchy protesters just the other side of St Giles Cathedral, which actually, to be frank, annoyed quite a lot of the pro-monarchy supporters, because the anti-monarchy protesters were given quite a prime position on the opposite, just opposite the cathedral. And as you probably heard in some of the footage there, they were chanting "Not My King" and they were shouting quite loudly. However, the bagpipes and the music from the armed services did appear to drown them out when the King and Queen arrived, along with the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay as well, but that is, unfortunately, it does appear that there was very much, they had a heavy presence there. I mean, you can see some of the pictures, these big yellow signs. You were mentioning, Patrick, earlier, you were questioning why do they not have jobs? Well, actually, some of those protesters from that campaign group Republic. It is their job. It's a campaign group, and some of them are paid to protest, but a vast majority are volunteers. So that was one of the protests. There was also a separate protest by Our Republic, which is a Scottish Republican movement. They were protesting outside the Scottish Parliament, and one of the co-leaders of the Green Party here in Scotland actually joined them. And bearing in mind, this particular guy was given an invitation to attend the service of Thanksgiving at St Giles Cathedral, and instead he turned it down to attend that Our Republic protest. So clearly there's very polarising views here, but it appears a vast majority of the people on the Royal Mile today were in support of the monarchy, but there are also tourists as well. It wasn't just people who had turned out to support the monarchy.
No, OK, all right. I think it's worthwhile moving on from those numpties with the big yellow signs and talking about what the whole point of today actually is. And also, I believe we might be expecting some kind of flyover at some point, which hopefully we will catch over your shoulder there.
Yes, so the Red Arrows, the famous Red Arrows, are going to be flying over Edinburgh Castle behind me, down the Royal Mile to the Palace of Holyrood House, where the King, Queen, Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, known as obviously the Prince and Princess of Wales elsewhere, they're going to be outside the Palace of Holyrood House, so that will be pretty exciting. That's expected in the next couple of minutes at 20 to the hour, so it is going to be quite a sight to round off the celebrations here today. It is a celebration of the coronation, but for Scotland, and the honours of Scotland were presented to His Majesty the King inside St Giles Cathedral earlier on today. It's the oldest set of crown jewels in Britain. They date back to the 1500s. Mary, Queen of Scots, was crowned with that exact crown all those years ago. But the sword, which you can just see on your screen now, that's brand new. That was commissioned last year, and it's named after the late Queen, Elizabeth II. And that is because the original Sword of State, gifted by a Pope to James IV of Scotland, it was seen as too fragile to be in use anymore. So a new sword was commissioned. £22,000 it costs, so it's got a hefty price tag. It's also very heavy, 7.5 kilograms, and it's 5 foot long. And many people are pointing out that it was Dame Catherine Granger who carried the sword and presented it to the King, the former Olympic gold medalist. So some people were saying, were comparing her to Penny Mordaunt, who of course carried the Sword of State inside Westminster Abbey with during the coronation service last month. So who held the sword better? Well, guess we'll have to wait for the viewers to make up their minds on that one.
Yes, we will indeed. I think Penny Mordaunt certainly held the sword for longer, though, didn't she? She was tasked with holding that for an incredibly long period of time at the coronation that we had here. So, supposedly, anyway, any second now, we are about to see some red arrows flying down the Royal Mile there. Near where you are. And of course it will be, I think it is worth noting, isn't it, that from what you were saying anyway, there were more people in support of the King and Queen than there were, you know, out chanting "Not My King." And I think that is quite important to know, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. There were 300 or so anti-monarchy protesters. There were a lot more pro-monarchy supporters. And inside the Abbey, Patrick, you'll like this, the sermon that was read by Sally Foster Fulton, Right Reverend Sally Foster Fulton, there was a lot of climate change references in it. And she said that we inherit the earth from our children, or the children inherit the earth from us, but we merely borrow it from them. But she also referred to the fact that our duty is to return the earth to our children and not baking to a crisp, and then referred to the fact directly to the King and Queen that they have advocated for climate change, particularly His Majesty the King when he was Prince of Wales, and trying to look after the earth for future generations. So it was quite a strong climate change theme of the service of Thanksgiving today.
Well, I'm sure the earth is very glad about that, and indeed it will be interesting because it ties in a little bit with something that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on Which is that Rishi Sunak might have actually done a decent thing, which appears to be that he's rowed back on a big international climate pledge, which could save us billions. The old net zero starts at home, which might be quite interesting. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. Just while we wait for the red arrows to go over as well, I'm just going to fill you in and just keep you teased about something that we're going to be talking about a bit later, talking about the climate. We're also going to be looking at what Just Stop Oil's antics were at Wimbledon. They stopped Wimbledon for a little bit, just stopped Wimbledon, just stopped tennis. They were protesting about Barclays Bank, so we're going to be showing you footage of that. We're hoping to be speaking to someone, the MP for Wimbledon as well, fingers crossed very shortly, to get their views on it all as well. Mick Lynch, the head of the RMT, is going to be joining me in a rare moment of conjoined thinking for myself and Mick Lynch, where he's going to be talking about the old train ticket offices going, and we're obviously campaigning to not kill cash, which I think will be important for us there. But just describe a little bit about where you are actually now, Cameron, then, and if people are just joining us, exactly what it is that we're waiting for, hopefully any second now.
Yeah, so if you are just joining us, we have just had the service of Thanksgiving in St Giles Cathedral, where the King was presented with the honours of Scotland, the oldest set of crown jewels in the British Isles. I am stood on a very well-positioned rooftop, I might add, with a view of Edinburgh Castle, where the crown jewels of Scotland, the honours of Scotland, are usually kept. And it's a whole mile-long road, which is very, very old indeed, and it runs all the way from the castle for a mile down to the Palace of Holyrood House, where the King and Queen and the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, who are Prince William and Princess Catherine, are waiting for this fly past of the red arrows. They are slightly delayed. We were expecting them at 20 to the hour, but I have been told that they have at least taken off from the airport just outside of Edinburgh, so it should be really any minute now. And the red arrows, of course, are used by the royal family and in processions for various different flypasts for trooping the colour celebrations and the coronations. Of course, they were meant to fly over, but the weather was so poor that they couldn't. So the fact that the celebration of the coronation in Scotland is happening, and the red arrows are going to be flying over Edinburgh Castle, I'm told, in the next 20-30 seconds or so, is going to be quite something, a very historical situation. I can now see the red arrows, so we'll just give you the...
Let's take the red arrows. Oh, there they are.
And here they come.
Look at that.
Red, white and blue, Patrick.
Yes, go on, Cameron. You're in a better position than me, so say what you see. Red, white and blue, is it?
Yeah, red, white and blue. There are 9 aircraft in total. 3 with red smoke, 3 with white smoke, 3 with blue smoke. The colours of the Union flag.
Oh, lovely. I think they've drowned out Cameron there, bless him, so we're going to talk over that, but that was the red arrows fly there over Edinburgh Cathedral. That was definitely worth a wait. I must say, it's on my bucket list to see the red arrows in person. 9 of them in total, as Cameron was saying to us there, roaring along the Royal Mile in Edinburgh. There we go. And you can see that trail of smoke there. Fantastic stuff. Great stuff. And thank you very much to Cameron Walker as well for expertly padding out a little bit there while we waited for the wonderful red arrows. Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Right, OK, so now this is a story that I think is going to get you all going. We're going to be following this all day, OK, because the home of the Dambusters, as many regular viewers and listeners will know, could soon be occupied by more than 1,000 exclusively male migrants. So we've gone from people who, of course, were fighting for this country to fighting-age males. But there we go. Now, the locals are fighting to keep the grave of the RAF hero's dog, the Dambusters dog, on the site. Plans to exhume the body of the dog buried at the former home of the Dambusters are going to be discussed at a council meeting, which we will be covering very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling
the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Is the NHS really a national treasure? That's what I'm going to be talking about at 4 p.m. And actually, in just a matter of moments, I'm going to be delving into this really bizarre issue surrounding the Captain Sir Tom Moore charity. I'm sure that you've all seen and heard of this. I'll be talking about that in a second. But before that, we've spoken a lot about RAF Scampton on this show because more than 1,000 male migrants could be, / almost definitely will be, about to be housed on the site of the Dambusters, an iconic historic site. But today, the decision to move the grave of the Dambusters dog will be debated at an extraordinary meeting of the local council's planning committee. The RAF is requesting permission to excavate any remains from the grave of Wing Commander Guy Gibson's dog and relocate it to RAF Mareham in Norfolk. I'm not sure if the dog has much of a connection to Norfolk, but there we go. Let's cross live now to RAF Scampton and join our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. And Will, I think this is a very visible symbol, isn't it, of the lengths that we are now having to go to accommodate some of these people. I mean, we're even digging up the Dambusters dog, for goodness sake. What's happening where you are?
Yes, well, this is RAF Scampton in the background. It was closed earlier in the year. It was also the home of the Red Arrows, as well as being the legendary home of 617 Squadron, the Dambuster men. And, of course, this backstory of whether 2,000 asylum seekers are going to be moved into RAF Scampton by the Home Office is the big news here. But it's kind of a little subplot what might happen with the Dambusters dog. Of course, it's Guy Gibson's dog. It came with him when 617 Squadron was first formed, and when it died on the night of the Dambusters raid, something that Guy Gibson hid from his men because he didn't want it to be seen as a bad omen. It was buried in front of Hangar 2, which has special protected listed status now, and Guy Gibson's dog has been there ever since. And of course, because of his name, the racial connotations, a word that we don't use in regular conversation now, there's of course always been a little bit of controversy for the last 15 to 20 years about the dog's name. But it's never been quite like this, because what the RAF Heritage team want to do is dig up any zoological remains of Guy Gibson's dog and potentially move it around 80 miles away to RAF Marham in Norfolk. Now, interestingly, that's a mile for every single year that Guy Gibson's dog has been buried. It's, of course, 80 years since the Dambusters raid this year. And what the decision tonight that's going to be made at West Lindsey District Council's Planning Committee meeting will be is whether the RAF can do what they're requesting. The RAF has had to request it because that Hangar 2 has Grade 2 listed status, and while the dog's grave isn't protected as such, it is protected because it's in the surroundings of that Grade 2 listed hangar. Now, to give you an idea of how much attention has been on this, around 200 people in the public have given comments on that application to the planning committee. Around 170 of them or so object to Guy Gibson's dog being dug up and removed from RAF Scampton, but also big industry bodies, the custodians of English history, historic England, they are recommending that the application be refused. So tonight, West Lindsey District Council is describing this planning committee meeting as extraordinary. We will know from working in the media that planning committee meetings don't tend to get a lot of interest from members of the public, but this one certainly does. So that meeting starts at around 6:30 tonight, about an hour away from where I'm standing right now at Lincolnshire Showground. The committee, the West Lindsey District Council, has moved to that bigger location from the usual council offices because the scale of interest is just so vast. But of course, the reason that RAF Heritage is applying for this consent is because they say that Guy Gibson's dog and the grave will be at risk in the uncertain future of what might happen if 2,000 asylum seekers do move in to RAF Scampton here in the coming months.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you very, very much, Will. Great to have you on the scene for us there. And I know I'm actually covering for the big guy, Nigel Farage, this evening, so I'll be on air from 7. So hopefully we have some answers, really, maybe some resolution, dare I say it. So I'll be seeing you a little bit later on, Will. Good stuff. Now, it is time for Patrick's Pick of the Day, where I focus on another story that's caught my eye. Weird one, this. OK, it seems fitting that the National Health Service's 75th birthday, we're talking about a man who did so much for the NHS. Captain Sir Tom Moore raised almost £39 million for NHS charities, but today his daughter is in the news for very different reasons. Captain Tom's daughter, Hannah Ingram Moore, has been ordered to demolish a building used as a spa that was built after her dad's incredible fundraising efforts. The Captain Tom Foundation has now stopped taking money from donors while the Charity Commission carries inquiries out. I mean, it is a fascinating one, that, isn't it, really? Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. I know that they've released a statement at the Captain Tom charity saying that, you know, they are now assisting with all of their inquiries. It's a bad look, isn't it, to be fair? It is quite a bad look. I've been asking you to get in touch with all your comments. Maurice, let's wait till the facts come out. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting one, this. Robert's been on. I think everyone who donated isn't bothered. I get what you mean, but I do also think that maybe the optics of building some kind of spa potentially doesn't look great. I did enjoy Kevin Maguire's tweet, which is that he walked so they can swim. Just Stop Oil has taken spectators at Wimbledon to breaking point today, stopping play at Court 18. When two protesters threw confetti and a jigsaw on the grass. We've got the footage. The climate group has said that we can't leave it to the next generation to pick up the pieces. The pair were arrested on suspicion of aggravated trespass and criminal damage. Now, it's remarkable because Wimbledon said that they were going to clamp down on people bringing stuff in. I'm not being funny, but how easy is it, seriously, to bring in a load of jigsaw pieces and whatever else, confetti and everything? I mean, seriously, who is doing the security there? Because there is a more serious issue here. If it's that easy for people to run onto a court with professional tennis players and do that, what happens if somebody wants to do something even more sinister? But there we go. We'll be talking more about that later on. The National Health Service is 75 years old today. Happy birthday to the NHS, our beloved NHS. Yes, there we go. OK. I am asking whether or not it really is a national treasure and whether everybody who works in it is indeed an angel. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Is the NHS really a national treasure, or is it part of some kind of weird pseudo-religious cult? Our political leaders decided to take time off from running the country today to go and, quite literally, worship it during a church service. Is it actually a national treasure? In other news, we need to save the Dambusters dog. Yes, RAF Scampton is almost definitely going to be used to house more than 1,000 male migrants. That is a historic site, and now the local council is having an extraordinary general meeting in order to decide whether or not to dig up the remains of a Dambusters hero dog. I mean, good grief. Really? Can't we just leave our history and indeed our dogs alone? Also going to be talking about this. Well, it looks as though Rishi Sunak might be getting the message on climate change. He has rowed back on spending billions and billions and billions of pounds to try to sort out the world's climate crisis on our own, essentially. Should net zero start at home? Also going to be talking about this. Yes, that's right. Is it really true that there are 2,000 rogue cops that need sacking? Now, I slate the police for not stopping Just Stop Oil and for a whole host of reasons. Go to do the Macarena at a Pride March and all of that nonsense, OK? But I really reject this idea that our Met and our police forces are institutionally racist and sexist and homophobic and all of this. I don't really buy this idea there can be 2,000 rogue coppers. Maybe I'm wrong. Patrick Christys from GB News. GBviews at gbnews.com. Let me know, do you think the NHS really is a national treasure? Happy birthday, by the way, NHS. Headlines now with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, a Red Arrows Fly Past has just taken place in Edinburgh to celebrate the King and Queen's coronation in Scotland. At St Giles Cathedral, the King had been presented with the honours of Scotland, the country's crown jewels. There was also a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle before the royal procession returned to Holyrood House. The Prince and Princess of Wales, known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland, were among those present today, as were the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Now, as you've been hearing, the NHS has been described as a treasured national institution as it celebrates its 75th birthday. But Labour is warning the health service will die without further investment and modernisation. A record 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, and the government has acknowledged that number could get worse before it gets better. Well, today, party leaders, along with the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, were among those attending a special service at Westminster Abbey, paying tribute to staff. Earlier, the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting told GB News that the NHS is facing the worst crisis in its history.
I'm deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Well, the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, who also happens to be a nurse, says strike action is putting more pressure on the service.
Although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
Now, also in the news today, 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested after disrupting play at Wimbledon. The match on Court 18 was briefly suspended after they threw what they called environmentally friendly confetti and a jigsaw on the grass. The group says it targeted the tennis tournament because of a sponsorship deal with Barclays Bank, which has invested £30 billion in oil and gas companies over the last 2 years. In a statement, Just Stop Oil said, "We can't leave it to the next generation to pick up the pieces." And earlier today, security staff at London's famous department store Harrods also removed a group of Just Stop Oil protesters. They were pictured holding placards on an escalator of the luxury store. Video posted to the group's Twitter account shows staff evicting a photographer. It's the latest in a series of stunts as the group calls on the government to end new fossil fuel licences. Now, there's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it'll impact vulnerable people and will lead to job losses. The decision about which offices will be closed will be made after a consultation process. Schools across England have been forced to close today or restrict access for students
with teachers walking off the job in a row over their pay. It's the 7th strike this year, and unions have warned there'll be more action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. As well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are also being affected. Birmingham teacher Leslie Quinlan says both staff and students deserve better.
Government aren't listening, and we're going to keep doing this until they do. We need to have a fully funded education system in this country. These children deserve so much better than this. What this government is happening, what it's doing to them. It's been going on for way too many years. We need to put a stop to it now and fund their education.
And lastly, the Captain Tom Foundation has halted donations and payments following a charity watchdog investigation. It comes as planning bosses order the demolition of an unauthorised building in Captain Tom's daughter's home. Hannah Ingram Moore and her husband submitted a planning application for a building in the grounds of their home in Bedfordshire in 2021. An additional application, though, for a building containing a spa and pool was turned down by the planning authorities. You're with GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Well, here is something that you will see covered up by loads of other media outlets. The latest round of immigration polling is in, and the message is loud and clear. The British public think immigration is too high. YouGov data shows 61% of Tory voters think we have too much immigration, 40% of Labour voters do, 32% of them think it's about right, and 13% think it's too low. But here is the damning one. 44% of Remain voters think immigration is too high. That is 15 points higher than this time last year. Remarkable, really, isn't it? Just 14% of Remainers think it's too low, by the way. So an important bit of context there. There you go. That's the reality. It's not controversial, racist or xenophobic to want to cut immigration. It's literally what people want. More people want that than want the same amount or more of it. How bleeding obvious do we have to make it? Is it not enough to vote consistently for a party that promises to reduce net migration? Is it not enough to vote to leave the EU so we could cut migration? Is it not enough to, when actually asked directly, say, we want to reduce immigration? And then we end up with a washed-up former Chancellor in the rather dull shape of Philip Hammond coming out and saying, oh, you know what we need to reduce inflation? More immigration. Flipping heck spreadsheet, Phil. I mean, give me strength. What is now obvious is that record levels of immigration are not a natural part of globalisation. It is a policy choice. It's deliberate. This is deliberate. And it is against the will of the people. How many think that blue sky thinkers, that political gurus, that political parties employ, they wrestle, don't they, to try to crack this enigma code of winning a general election? God, they look for this secret answer. What is it there up in the clouds? Well, the answer is right here. The public are telling you, just cut immigration. And then we end up with people like the Archbishop of Canterbury now getting way above his station in the House of Lords, trying to actually enact his own policy. Look, if he wants to put forward a new government policy, then he should stand for election and put a manifesto to the nation and see who votes for him, not invoke some warped spirit of Christ in the upper chamber to try to get us to develop a long-term strategy for tackling the refugee crisis. We have a long-term strategy. Isn't that obvious? The strategy is to let them all in and then let them live here long-term, forever, in fact, even if we have to pay for them. I mean, there is a certain idiocy about the head of the Church of England fully supporting the importation of a load of people who are not Christian, but we'll just leave that to one side for now, shall we? But this is what people do. The liberal elites, the holier-than-thou come-by-our lefties, they portray themselves as the virtuous, the righteous. That allows them to completely ignore the fact that what they are saying is deeply unpopular. I think it's time for the silent majority to stop being so silent. Significantly more people think immigration is too high compared to this time last year. Very few people want more of it. Start voicing your views with confidence. Well, that's what I think. I want to hear from you, gbviews@gbnews.com, and I will have much more on that story a little bit later on in the show. But let's get to our top story, shall we? Yes, absolutely. Who could have for the NHS? Happy birthday, NHS. It's 75 today, the NHS, and it is celebrating its birthday. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, bear in mind, OK, I want you all to just remember now, the NHS is not a religious cult, OK? It's not. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak attended a service at Westminster Abbey this morning where the Prime Minister and Sir Keir Starmer gave readings. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says that the NHS is our most treasured national institution. He also says the service needs constant evolution, not whole-scale reform. But at a time when waiting lists are at a record 7.4 million and rising, and the amount of money pumped into the NHS is bigger than ever, isn't it time for what Barclay called a big bang moment? I am joined now by Stella Smith, who is the CEO of Perks, which is a private healthcare service. Look, thank you very, very much. I was hanging my head in agony earlier on because I was just looking at it and thinking, you know, for a group of people who must understand that the NHS needs reform, and they then go and literally worship at its altar, which means the next time that they try to do what is needed, which is instigate some kind of radical reform, it's going to look like they're going against the word of Christ, for goodness sake. Look, what kind of reform do you think we need?
Absolutely. Look, I thoroughly support the NHS. I think we all have so many personal experiences, over 1 million people being treated every day. I think all of us will have those, so we thoroughly support. My business brings private doctor services and counselling services for just £4.50 a month. And I think that, look, for me, there's an ageing population, that's clear. I think population growth, clearly we're living a lot longer, not necessarily in the best of health. So that pressure is clear. The way we achieve pricing is through technology. And I think the use of technology and preventative measures can help. I don't think that, as you say, there is a silver bullet that solves everything, but at least an impact into those issues.
Yeah, but I think our politicians are absolutely terrified of doing what they know needs to be done, because we have a sacred cow here that employs loads of people, OK? And by the way, that's not going to change. In fact, it might even make their lives easier. Under some kind of pseudo-private system, we can quite possibly pay people more and give them a better quality of life, which is why loads of people are moving to Australia to go and work in their healthcare system. It could also then end up working out better for the patients as well. Do you think our politicians are too afraid of reform?
I think when we think about politics, I think we often have a change, you know, longevity in government, and then seeing that, you know, follow through over a period of time. Short-termism, for me, is clear. But I think that, you know, ultimately that debate of public-private has been there for a long time and will continue to run. I think where, you know, my company or I sit and play a part is that private healthcare is out of the reach of the masses. So my job, I believe, is to use technology to try and democratise access to many more. Look, £4.50 isn't actually affordable for everybody, but it's affordable for far more. So it's how can we utilise, how can we take positive action? How can we actually do something to make change? And yeah, I think I would love to work closer with government, and you know, I think using corporations, using young technology companies like my own and many others, using digital to help try and solve. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but I think the best way to make change is to use your feet and actually pick up your pens and your tools and do something each day to try and make it happen.
Just what do I get for £4.50 a month then, in terms of private healthcare? Just out of interest.
It's really cool. 24/7 access to a doctor's appointment for the individual and everybody in their family within the same household. Unlimited appointments. Also access to unlimited counselling, digital physio, virtual gym classes, all the things you get if you work for a large employer. But you can sign up just as an individual person or as a worker in a smaller company. So the reason we have it is because I ended up with a number of smaller businesses. I also had quite a privileged career as well. And in the privileged career, I was given loads of stuff. the same human being. But as an individual with a small business, I get nothing. So that's why we built it. What we didn't realise is that, of course, I mean, the crisis in the NHS, there's been one for many moons in many guises. But ultimately, we've managed to build a piece of technology that can help solve. And it's not just us. There are lots of things that we could do to actually make an impact. And as you say, if you think of something holy, you think of it as perfect. And nobody, I think, can say it's perfect, but they can say that it's amazing in its own right in certain ways, which
it's
it
a
is.
great idea. Like, look, this is unequivocal, right, that the NHS does save lives, and that people who work in the NHS, by far and away the vast majority of them, are in there for the right reasons. They do an incredible job. I've never saved a life. If you were in desperate need of physical aid, the last person you would call would be me. I would make it worse for you. But at the same time, when you are literally there reading a prayer about the NHS and creating some kind of religious ceremony about it, like you've just said, exactly, it makes it seem like it's, well, holy, that it's virtuous completely in its entirety and it's untouchable. And then when someone comes along and tries to say something which we actually need now, which is, I would argue, quite radical reform, we would go, flipping it, it's like you just stamped on a crucifix or something, and we just can't have that. I find it absolutely baffling that we would live in a country that would allow that situation to happen. But look, good luck to you. Thank you very much, and thank you for providing a little bit of context as well as to what is out there for actually not a huge amount of money, OK? And this is the thing. Go on, one last one with you, if that's all right, Stella. Look, I don't know how you feel about this, but should rich people just be made to use private healthcare if you earn over a certain amount of money, do you think?
Good debate. And actually, for a period of time, I did do that personally. So I can only speak anecdotally for myself. I don't like the idea of anybody being made to do anything. I think there's a freedom piece around making our own personal choices. I think that whatever we can do as individuals to help is important. But I think, ultimately reducing the cost so that it's accessible to far more if they want it is a more positive way to answer that question than, historically I did. And then I went to an NHS GP and they told me I was silly, and that I should be going along. What I would say is the NHS has been amazing because they have lots of services that are preventative. And I think those preventative measures have shown those statistics coming down as well. So the more we can do on that with technology, I think the more the better.
Good stuff. Stella, thank you very much. Stella Smith, who's the CEO of Perks, which is a private healthcare service. Yeah, look, I'm going to be having a big discussion later on in the show as well about whether or not all NHS staff are indeed angels, because that seems to be something, there's been a lot of COVID fatigue, hasn't it? Oh, we kept you going through COVID. Yeah, all right. But, I mean, to be fair, that is your job, actually, in the middle of a national health crisis for the National Health Service. And we shut down everything else for the NHS, didn't we? I am absolutely flabbergasted that today we seriously had a religious ceremony at Westminster Abbey to mark the birthday of the National Health Service. I long for the one that we have to celebrate HMRC. I also long for the day that we actually have politicians who are not content with splashing tens, if not hundreds of billions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money every single year into a health service that needs urgent reform and then not having the bottle to actually reform it. It's not really serving anyone, in my view, that well, OK? You have medical negligence claims that almost are hitting the same amount of money as the annual budget for the NHS. The staff are on strike all the time. People are leaving left, right and centre. We've got record waiting times. If anyone thinks that that is something that's worth celebrating in a house of God, then good grief. I think we're setting the bar pretty flipping low, aren't we? Anyway, you get more on this story at gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and all the latest breaking news. Now, as you may already know, we are, of course, campaigning to stop the UK becoming a cashless society, and we've got an interesting story coming your way about this. We've launched a campaign called Don't Kill Cash. It's already very popular. So far, more than 114,000 people have signed the petition. More and more retailers are choosing to only accept card payments. And vulnerable people who rely on cash are being left behind. 5.4 million adults rely on cash. We know that. Let's just get to how people can sign this petition. So, yes, there is going to be on your screens very shortly a QR code. There it is, where you can hold your smartphone over it and you can sign our petition to try to stop us from becoming a cashless society, which puts a lot of the tyranny in the power of the banks, doesn't it? You can also go to our website, gbnews.com/cash. Please don't kill cash. Now, the bad news is that Just Stop Oil have once again tried to ruin people's days, disrupting Wimbledon. The good news is that two of their eco-idiots are locked in a police cell and won't be annoying us anytime soon. I will have all of the latest on this in just a tick. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few minutes, I will discuss whether the government should spend more than £11 billion on this country instead of sending it abroad. Well, it's another day where the Just Stop Oil protesters disturb an event enjoyed by thousands of people. 2 people threw orange confetti and pieces of jigsaw onto the court number 18 at Wimbledon, which briefly disrupted a match between, here we go, Grigor Dimitrov and Sho Shimabukuro. There we go. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of aggravated trespass and criminal damage. I'm joined now by the MP for Wimbledon, Stephen Hammond. Thank you very much, Stephen. Look, what do you make of this?
Good afternoon. Well, again, I think like a lot of people would be pretty angry that Just Stop Oil have taken their protest, they've disturbed other people's enjoyment. It happens time and time again, where this group use guerrilla tactics, which frankly, I hope are losing them support, because it's really when they affect other people's lives, other people's enjoyment. Everybody has a right to protest, but they could have done that by standing outside the gates. They didn't need to come in and do what they've done.
No, I mean, today, so far, Just Stop Oil have held up traffic at Parliament Square, they've raided Harrods, and they've stopped Wimbledon. I mean, there were I was in Parliament Square earlier. You've got hundreds of tourists there, so that's their view of Britain. You've got, obviously, Harrods, massive footfall, that's those people's views of Britain. You've got a global audience at Wimbledon, that's their people's view of Britain. I mean, what's it going to take for this government to designate this like a terror group?
Well, they're not going to designate them a terror group, but the government have put in place a number of actions where operationally now the police can deal with this, starting with the public order bill and the revisions to that. And I'm absolutely supportive of what the government is trying.
Oh, I think we might have lost Stephen there. I think we've lost Stephen. Stephen's either standing very still or he's frozen. Anyway, that was Stephen Hammond there, who was the MP for Wimbledon, who we have back, I believe. Yes, Stephen, sorry, we lost you for a second there, my good man. You were saying that you're doing enough with public order bills and all of this stuff, and I understand that, but it's not putting them off, is it?
It's not at the moment, but once you start actually using the provisions that are there, once we get the police actually arresting these people and making it clear that this is a criminal offence, people have the right to protest, but they don't have the right to disturb my constituents, global events, national infrastructure.
No, indeed. I think there is a wider concern here, which is for the ordinary Brit who means no harm to anybody, who wants to go to events like the Ashes, who wants to go to events like Wimbledon. At some point, we're going to have airport-style security at every major public gathering because of this lot of eco-loons, and they are impacting our human rights in that sense.
Yeah, they definitely are, and that's why the public order bill is there. You are right that if we don't stop them, I think the good news is that public opinion is actually going against them quite heavily now. I don't get many people supporting them in my post, my email box. What I get is people saying they're frustrated at, they talk about, these are people who are trying to get to work every day, these are people who are trying to live their lives and enjoy their lives. And once the public turn against them, don't they're doing, I hope that will stop them as well.
No, indeed, like you said, I mean, it's a bizarre... I mean, you will know a thing or two about campaigning and trying to drum up public support, and sometimes it may be easier than others, but it's fair to say I don't think they're going about it in the right way. I mean, can you imagine the ideas meeting there about, right, OK, let's annoy the working class by going after the snooker and a couple of other events, stopping people getting to work. Let's wind up the kind of cushy middle classes by going after the Chelsea Flower Show and Wimbledon as well. It is almost like they're trying to alienate absolutely everybody, isn't it? Look, what they will say is this, which is that you are not doing enough to stop the climate crisis and that we're all going to burn to death. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would point out that this government and this we've seen in the last 10 years, this part of this country move much closer to further on renewable oil and renewable energy. We've seen renewable energy come through. We've done things about oil or North Sea gas. But you need to look also, we can't just ban a source of energy. But we've done many things that have actually moved the environmental and attacked climate change. We've been at the forefront of that over the last 10, 12 years. You may want to do more, but there's a time to do these things. And there's a progress that has to happen. Otherwise, the cost for people's lives will be too high.
No, indeed. And in fact, there's a topic that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on, which is very close to a lot of our viewers' hearts, which is this kind of headlong rush towards net zero and everything that goes with it. And that is hitting a lot of people in the pockets. And it is good news if Rishi Sunak does row back on us splurging billions of pounds on some kind of big international, eco effort, when you could argue that right now in the middle of a cost of living crisis, we have a few things that we could be spending it on here. Fascinating, though, isn't it, though, that I think the Labour Party take a different approach to Just Stop Oil. They appear to be willing to just take their money.
Yeah, they do. And as you well know, that I think they've accepted, I'm just looking at the numbers here, I think it's £1.5 million. And yet already that money and the support for them has come under criticism from the General Secretary of the GMB as well. So I think the Labour Party need to work out, first of all, what their plan is about oil and gas and what they might have for energy security and the cost for people's bills. And secondly, do you really want to support an organisation like this?
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Look, Stephen, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on at short notice. And hopefully we can talk again, but not when Just Stop Oil have done something. That'd be nice. Stephen Hammond there, who's the MP for Wimbledon. Right. OK. Play was halted. Well, I've got breaking news, apparently. I believe. Play was halted on Court 18 for a second time after another protester. Let's bring Stephen back on if we can. For a second time after another protester threw confetti onto the grass during British #1 Katie Boulter's first round match. I will read that again. I was just getting that in my ear, literally as we read it there. So play was halted on Court 18 for a second time after another protester threw confetti to the grass during British #1. OK, Stephen's still there, yep? The Conservative MP. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, back it. Well, we've had the opposite of my wish because now I'm talking to you immediately again after Just Stop Oil have just done something else. Right, I mean, to be honest with you, Stephen, I've got to find it absolutely remarkable that this lot were let in and that then once they'd done the first round of them, it turned out there were more of them there. I mean, hopefully this lot get lifted.
Hopefully this lot go the same way as the previous lot and the police take action and they're locked up. Secondly, Wimbledon are going to have to look quite a lot at their security. People do look in their bags, but they clearly didn't look very carefully if they brought this in.
No, indeed. All right, well, look, Stephen, I'll let you get on the case, all right? OK, you're going to have to go and clean up your constituency.
I have to go and have a look myself.
Yeah, spot of tennis, just for research purposes. Stephen Hammond there is the Tory MP for Wimbledon. Right, OK, well, there we go. Can I just say, actually, that is absolutely ludicrous. When you think about it, how hard is it, seriously, how hard is it to stop someone coming into an event with a bag full of jigsaw pieces, some confetti, some orange paint or whatever? I mean, honestly, when you think about the level of security that you normally have to go through for anything, how difficult is it? I just wonder whether or not there's someone on the inside there. I just wonder. Anyway, loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. I will ask, with this country facing so many problems, should Rishi Sunak ditch our £11.6 billion climate pledge? Silly, well, that'll get the Just Stop Oil lot going, won't it? And find out why it could soon be easier to sack rogue police officers. But first, it's your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Well, the top stories this hour, as you've just been hearing, some breaking news in the last few minutes. Play has been halted for a second time at Wimbledon today. Earlier on today, 2 Just Stop Oil protesters were arrested after they threw what they called environmentally friendly confetti and a jigsaw on Court 18. The group saying it targeted the tennis tournament because of a sponsorship deal with Barclays, which has given, they say, £30 billion to oil and gas companies over the last 2 years. In a statement, Just Stop Oil said, "We can't leave it to the next generation to pick up the pieces." Well, we understand that play has been stopped once again at Wimbledon. Details just coming into us. As soon as we have any more on that, we'll bring it to you. In the meantime, a Red Arrows flypast took place today in the skies over Edinburgh, concluding the King's coronation there. A spectacular red, white and blue sight in the skies at St Giles Cathedral. The King, too, presented with the honours of Scotland, the country's crown jewels. There was also a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle before the royal procession returned to Holyrood House. Now, the NHS has been honoured during a ceremony at Westminster Abbey today, with the Prime Minister delivering a reading to mark its 75th anniversary.
I was sick, and you took care of me.
Short but sweet. He said a bit more than that, I can assure you. But anyway, that comes as Labour warned the health service will die without further investment and modernisation. Currently, a record 7.4 million people are on the waiting list, and the government has acknowledged that number could get worse before it gets better. There's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, which has been unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest locations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it's going to impact vulnerable people and will lead to job losses. Those are your headlines. More on all those stories. Head to our website, gbnews.com.
Well, is Rishi Sunak about to go back on a promise to send billions of pounds abroad to help fight climate change? And if so, is that a good thing? Sunak's government is reported to be considering ditching the UK's £11.6 billion promise to developing countries. Well, I'm joined now by Jack Richardson, who's Head of Energy and Climate Change at Onward Energy. Jack, thank you very much. What possible justification can there be for building some kind of flood defence system in Bangladesh when we're all skint over here?
Well, thanks very much for having me on, Patrick. So essentially, I think the way to think about international climate finance is climate change is a global threat, and there's going to be countries that are already under a lot more environmental pressure than we are. A lot of them are countries that we're trying to reach out to as we geopolitically compete with countries like China. So if we can help them deal with the environmental pressures that they're being put under by climate change already right now, then I think that's actually quite a good investment. But I know that there's a lot of pressure on the foreign aid budget already, and that is in large part because we've been helping Ukraine, which I think is a very good thing.
It's just another example, isn't it, of us helping the world when here we've got record NHS waiting lists, we've got a housing crisis, we've got massive issues everywhere you look, we've got security tags on milk because inflation is so high. What benefit would I see from us spending £11.6 billion in, I don't know, Eritrea?
So I understand it's difficult to sort of justify foreign aid spending, but we have already cut the foreign aid budget in response to the need to spend more here. We cut it down from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5% in response. Completely understand why the government did that, but I think the UK, we're a country which does have an international presence. We're often very proud of that. We've been helping Ukraine. We've been, helping countries across the world, and I think helping them with climate change, which is as big a threat as it comes. It is global. It is up there with nuclear armed nutcases in Russia, for example. If we can help countries which we're also trying to forge trade partnerships with and cooperate with them that way, then I think that is a good investment.
Would we not be just paying to defend them against China's mess, though? I note that China has pumped out more greenhouse gases and bad things into the atmosphere in the last 10 years or so than we've done since the Industrial Revolution. Why are we paying for that?
I absolutely agree. I do think we should be pointing out to these countries that while we're, as part of our offer to them, we're up for helping them deal with these pressures, which often are not their own fault. We can point to China and go, they're still pumping out lots of emissions. I think that's absolutely something the government should do, and I think it is actually something the Foreign Secretary has begun to do. And actually, what I would like to see, if I may, is that we target our foreign aid budget much more effectively, including our international climate finance. So rather than just giving lots of money to the UN to spend on programmes which we might not see the immediate benefit from, I think we should target it far more effectively to Commonwealth countries. So when we joined the EU, we kind of forgot about the Commonwealth, and I think that helping with climate change with Commonwealth countries who are often very much under threat from climate change is a good way to sort of rebuild our relationship with our forgotten friends and allies.
No, I'm completely with you on that, and I don't understand why we didn't do more of that to begin with, to be honest with you. It was a massive slap in the face to a lot of Commonwealth countries when we actually joined the European Union. But when we add up the cost of things like ULEZ, all of these clean energy zones that we're having right the way through to our international commitments, talking about, everything that it's going to take for us to hit net zero, people banning the sale of petrol cars by 2030 if all of that comes in, and then you add all of this to it. I can't but wonder, does anyone have any idea how much this is costing us in a total amount of money? I suspect the answer, I don't know, the answer to that might be no, is it? But if the answer is no, isn't that deliberate? Because if people knew the true cost, they'd think it was mental.
So the CCC did some calculations. I can't quite remember. I think it was about 3% of GDP out to 2030, and then that's now come down as technology costs fall. The Office for Budget Responsibility said that it costs, I think, around 300 billion, but then they said that the cost of doing nothing on climate change is far more. And I think also we've just come through a gas price crisis where we've had to have a massive state intervention to basically subsidise everyone's energy bills, and that's because of our reliance on fossil fuels. So moving over to cleaner sources of energy, which are now by far cheaper, much more efficient and cleaner, and will reduce our contribution to climate change, that is actually better for everyone's energy bills, for instance. And then 11.6 billion, I don't think we're going to be able to hit that target now because we've been focusing on helping Ukraine, but 11.6 billion over 6 or 7 years is a pretty good investment in terms of foreign aid spending.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting there because we kind of warped our foreign aid budget by essentially, what would I say, massaging it by using it to pay for what's going on in the Channel as well. So there is the money that's going there. You mentioned there about, we're paying for Ukraine. OK, all right, fine. We've got an Archbishop of Canterbury now who wants us to take part in some kind of global refugee agenda. And there'll always be something. There will always be something else. And, you know, meanwhile, we have people here who are choosing between heating and eating. I am just going to ask you a question. You might laugh at this, but I do want to know your take on it, which is that when every horror show climate prediction from the past has been wrong, why should the British taxpayer believe this one and then pay for it?
Yeah, I understand the kind of doom-mongering on climate. I don't really agree with it myself, but like we can't lose sight of the fact that climate change is a very real risk, and it does need managing, and it's a risk which is already impacting countries around the world far more than it will necessarily impact us. We do still need to adapt ourselves. I'm absolutely convinced of that because we see flooding and heat waves affecting our crop yields, for instance. But I think we absolutely, despite how annoying Just Stop Oil is, for instance, we can't lose sight of the fact that climate change is a very real threat, and the UK should be at the forefront of helping to deal with it.
All right, Jack, look, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate you coming on and putting up with me as well. Jack Richardson there is the Head of Energy and Climate at Onward Energy. Good lad. All right, OK, so look, after a series of police scandals, the government is taking action and is trying to make it easier to sack rogue officers. Supposedly, 2,000 coppers might go. Look, there are bad apples. I mean, you can think of some very obvious examples of that horrendous stuff. I really push back at this notion of the police being institutionally full of wrong-uns. So we'll find out exactly what the situation is very shortly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel. Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
At 5 o'clock, I will mark the 75th birthday of the NHS. Oh, let's just remind ourselves of the... Yeah, I did have an NHS birthday cake here, but I've eaten it in the last break. So, there we go. The 75th birthday of the NHS by asking a very controversial question, but one I think that needs answering. Are all NHS staff angels? But now, to news that the government is planning to make it easier to sack police officers. The police has been dogged by a series of scandals in recent years. Wayne Couzens, obviously, was a serving officer when he kidnapped, raped and murdered Sarah Everard, and David Carrick pleaded guilty to 85 serious offences, including rapes and sexual assault. The Home Office is now acting after Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the disciplinary system was bizarre and over-regulated. So they're looking really to streamline, I think, the, I suppose, sacking and dismissal process. Joining me now is Martin Underhill, who's the former Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. Thank you very much. Are the police here just rolling over and taking an unnecessary kicking, do you think, or do they need this?
I'll be honest, Patrick, I heard your comment before the break. I think they do need this. This is an endemic issue that's been going on for a decade. When we saw the recession, the police wage went down by £4,000 to £5,000 a year, and police vetting was cut by 3/4 because there weren't enough cops on the streets. So the vetting units were basically disbanded. And when you add those two things, you're attracting the wrong people and we're not vetting them properly. And that's why you get the Couzens and the Carrick situation. So I don't think every cop is bent. I don't think every cop is a pervert. I share your view that you said as you went into the break. But when you look at the figures that Mark Rowley is talking about, the Met is 25% of policing. So if he's saying he needs to get rid of 500 officers, that is 2,000 officers in the country. And actually, when I was the Police Crime Commissioner at Dorset, we had 3 or 4 independent chair decisions that myself and the Chief Constable were deeply unhappy about. And we had no form of redress. You know, an independent chair said, we've got to admonish the officer and let them keep their job. And in one case, that officer committed theft. And we had no recall to change that decision. So I do think the system is broken. I do think it needs changing. And I think it's about time that we change things and put it back to how it was. Where 10 years ago, Chief Constables made that decision.
Do we have a disproportionate number of dodgy cops?
That's $1 million question. I don't think we've got a disproportionate number of dodgy cops. I think society standards have changed. I think expectations of our cops have changed in the last 20 years. What a cop did 20 years ago was accepted. Now it's a discipline hearing. Society's changed. Policing hasn't caught up. Does that mean we've got more people who are going to face discipline hearings? Probably yes, particularly when you add the issue of the low wage, which attracts the wrong people, and the vetting issues, which are now, thankfully, being rectified.
What is the wage, then?
Well, when I left as Police Crime Commissioner, the starting wage for police officers was roughly 23,000. And as I said to my constituents, you could earn that working in McDonald's. It's just crazy starting wage for a very, very difficult job. And it's hardly a good way to start your career pathway on £23,000 a year. And that was enforced by the government against the advice of chief constables, against the advice of police crime commissioners. And I think that's when the rot set in. I mean, I remember, I am an old person. I'm your typical armchair detective.
Martin? Go on.
But when I joined the police, I remember being told 1 in 100 applicants got the job. Now it's 1 in 2 applicants gets the job because nobody's applying. Because, seriously, because they don't pay the wage.
Can you imagine, not getting it? Just look at yourself in the mirror, go, what on earth? How did I not get this job? You know?
And on top of that, Patrick didn't give me any cake for the NHS. He ate it all himself during the break.
I've eaten the cake. I have. I'm sorry. I've eaten the cake. All right. I've eaten the happy bloody birthday, NHS. There you go. But no, but seriously, I mean, do we have a problem now, though, when it comes to, you said attracting the wrong type of person. Is it a job that attracts people who are on a power trip? Is it or is there an element to this, which is that the police can't do right for doing wrong? You want to move somebody from, who's glued themselves to a road, you're getting shouted at by the public, this, that and the other, and then you rip the hand off the pavement and you find yourself in a disciplinary hearing. You stop and search someone, all of a sudden you're a racist. I mean, is it very, very difficult now?
It is very difficult, and I actually respect someone who joins the police force in 2023 because don't forget, everything now is on camera. So that's what I was saying about 20 years ago. What was tolerated, if you like, is no longer tolerated because it's on TikTok, it's immediately filmed. Every decision a police officer makes individually or as a police force is under public scrutiny, and that makes it hugely difficult. It takes really, really unusual skills to be an effective frontline police officer in 2023, and you're not going to get that person if you don't pay the wage to make it worthwhile. But they have unique skills. I admire them enormously. Okay. You mentioned earlier our angels in the NHS. Nurses have unique skills. These are certain skill sets that we as a country should be proud of, and we don't pay or recompense them. So it's hardly a surprise that we end up
and you can't
where we are.
strike either. This is the thing. I think I'm right to say you're not allowed to go on strike either, are you? I don't think police officers.
Well, interesting. You're talking about the regulations changing. The regulations can be changed in a matter of months because it's just a quick statutory instrument through Parliament. It isn't like changing employment law, but they can't go on strike. So you have to have a trade-off. But I actually think we've got to get back to basics. If a police officer inappropriately deals with a member of the public, they're sacked. They're suspended, then sacked. That's where we were 20 years ago. It's all just become a bit of a mess now. I just hope that the government don't knee-jerk this. They've got to do this properly. Right. And the other thing, quickly, Patrick, something I feel very strongly about, as Police Crime Commissioner, I removed 4 officers' pensions who were sent to jail. And that isn't done enough. You can take away police officers' pensions. Wayne Couzens' pensions was taken away because it was such a high-profile case. But police crime commissioners have the power to remove up to 40% of a police officer's pension. I don't think that's being done enough, and I think the public would expect that to happen in every case where someone's sent to jail.
Martin, thank you very much. Martin Underhill there is the former Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. Right, OK, now... Yesterday, I said I would never talk about my appearance on the Dream Boys again, OK? Well, I'm afraid I was wrong about that, but it's for a good reason, because I'm going to talk about it right now. It will be the last time, although possibly maybe a bit later on in the show, actually. You see, we finally closed the Just Giving page last night, which thankfully so many of you have actually donated to. Now, around about a year ago, I said that I would get in shape and I would dance with a group of male strippers, all for the mental health charity Mind. And last Wednesday, I finally did it. And it was, to be honest with you, the greatest experience of my life. I absolutely enjoyed it, even though a lot of you people had to, of course, sit through it and endure it. Well, we did decide that we were going to close donations. Yes, that was my backside that came out there. We did decide that we were going to close donations last night, and I'm hoping that we might be able to reveal to you exactly how much money that we have raised. I can reveal to you that you have given an incredible £110,206. But on top of that, there's more than £18,000 in gift aid. So actually, you have raised about 130 grand for the mental health charity Mind. Thank you very much to everybody who has donated, giving their hard-earned cash in the middle of a cost of living crisis. It's been a fantastic campaign. If you're going to do something, you know, try and do it properly. We certainly tried to do everything that we possibly could in order to raise money for people struggling with mental health issues. And I just want to say thank you. That final grand total is just shy of £130,000. That will save lives. So thank you very much, everybody. Now, in the next hour, I am going to be speaking to the one, the only, Mick Lynch, off of the RMT. But we have found a subject that we both agree on. And actually, I'm really looking forward to that particular chat. And the National Health Service is 75 years old today. Well done, our beloved NHS. Here's a question for you. Are all their staff the angels that we've always been told they are? I will be having a rip-roaring discussion on all of that. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Happy birthday, our beloved NHS, 75 years old today. Are all NHS staff angels? Easy for me to say. There we go. I'm going to be having that big discussion very, very shortly. And I'm very much looking forward to this. Mick Lynch is about to join me off of the RMT. He's going to kick off, but we have found a point of agreement because we are hurtling towards a cashless society. It will also mean, potentially anyway, fewer jobs as ticket offices that accept cash at train stations around the country could close. This is a terrible thing. I'm looking forward to having a chat with Mick very shortly. And should we be keeping religion out of immigration and what's going on in the Channel? It comes as Archbishop Justin Welby and a whole host of other religious figures as well have joined forces to criticise the illegal migration bill. What do you all make of that? Patrick Christys on GB News. Loads to go out today. GB Views at gbnews.com. How do you feel about the NHS turning 75? Does it need urgent reform? Or do you think it is a sacred cow that is worth preserving? GB Views at gbnews.com. Now, though, headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. An impressive Red Arrows fly past has taken place over the last hour in the skies over Edinburgh, concluding the King's coronation in Scotland. Take a look. If you're listening on radio, the sky painted red, white and blue there as the Red Arrows fly over. And at St Giles Cathedral, the King was presented with the honours of Scotland. That's the country's crown jewels. There was also a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle before the royal procession returned to Holyrood House. The Prince and Princess of Wales, known in Scotland as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, were among those present, as were the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Now, as you've been hearing, the NHS has been honoured today during a ceremony at Westminster Abbey with the Prime Minister delivering a reading to mark its 75th birthday.
I was sick, and you took care of me.
And that as Labour warned the health service will die without further investment and modernisation. A record 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, and the government's acknowledged that number could get worse before it gets better.
I'm deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. And my answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster.
Well, the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, who also happens to be a nurse, says strike action is just putting more pressure on the NHS.
Although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
Now, the Wimbledon tennis tournament was disrupted by Just Stop Oil twice today. A protester has been arrested on suspicion of aggravated trespass and criminal damage after confetti was first of all thrown on court 18. And that comes after 2 other Just Stop Oil activists were detained for targeting the same court. The group says it took action because of the tournament's sponsorship deal with Barclays, which it says has given £30 billion to oil and gas companies over the last 2 years. And earlier today, security staff at London's famous department store Harrods also removed a group of protesters. Just Stop Oil were pictured holding placards on an escalator in the luxury store. And video was posted to the group's Twitter account showing staff evicting a photographer. It's the latest in a series of stunts as the group calls for the government to end new fossil fuel licences. Now, the United Kingdom has signed a new partnership deal with Poland aimed at increasing foreign policy and defence cooperation. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, and Defence Secretary Ben Wallace earlier met with the Polish Defence Minister to agree on their mutual priorities, including issues in Belarus and China. The new 2030 strategic partnership builds on the 2017 UK-Poland Treaty, which provided a framework for improved cooperation between the two NATO states. Mr. Wallace praised Poland for its ongoing support for Ukraine since the start of the Russian invasion.
Britain and Poland puts its money where its mouth is. It hasn't just condemned Russia with words, it has condemned Russia with its direct support to Ukraine, using Polish airfields to help get into Ukraine the very important equipment that was needed right from the start.
Now, there's anger over plans which would see mostly the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations across England, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest stations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it's bound to impact vulnerable people and, of course, lead to job losses. The decision about which offices will close will be made after a consultation process. Today, schools across England have been forced to close or restrict access to students, with teachers walking off the job in a row over pay. It's their 7th strike this year, and unions have warned there'll be more action in the autumn if a deal can't be reached. As well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are also being disrupted. Members of the National Education Union are due to walk out again on Friday. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Well, loads to get through. Let's get started. The NHS is celebrating its 75th birthday today. And bear in mind, again, just want to remind everyone, the NHS, it's not some kind of cult. It's not a sacred cow. Rishi Sunak attended a service at Westminster Abbey this morning where both he and Sir Keir Starmer gave religious readings. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, said that our NHS is our most treasured national institution. The tributes have been pouring in. We're going to light up buildings in blue later on as well. We have stopped just short, by the way, of a state-mandated clapathon in the streets this evening and allowing all children or forcing them at gunpoint to chant about the NHS at the start of their school day. But do we need to stop looking at our health service through rose-tinted glasses, putting everyone that works for it on a pedestal, or actually are they all heroes? Joining me now is TV personality Steve Miller. Steve, thank you very much. Do you think that everyone who works for our NHS is an angel?
Well, I think there are some people in the NHS, in fact, many people in the NHS who do great work and they are angels. Let's park those to the side a minute, because also I believe there are many that work in the NHS that are rude, that are obnoxious, that are lazy and are incompetent. And actually, I think you'd find that the general public tend to agree with me. And, you know, like I say, there are many that do great work, so let's not forget that. However, there are different categories of staff that aren't angels. You have, for example, that sometimes the doctor's receptionist that's like a terrier with lockjaw, you know, that's kind of fighting you on the phone because you want an appointment with the GP. You've got nurses. Many do a great job. Many are angels. Many are not. And I'll tell you why, because I've witnessed it. I've witnessed those nurses that are on that nurses station on their phone doing the gossip. Yeah. So many nurses are not angels. Many need to go on an empathy deepening course. I tell you, the staff group that do a great job, though, Patrick, most of them anyway, the vast majority from my experience, are the healthcare assistants and the carers that are out there.
Yeah.
Those people are the grafters. Let's not forget that. And can I tell you this, right?
Yeah.
I never forget seeing a dietitian. I was just meeting with a dietitian who actually, quite frankly, was as wide as the room I'm in now, and actually was so quite hostile towards me, I actually thought at one point she was going to eat me herself.
Good grief. I mean, yes, to be fair, that does bring back memories of me when a doctor whose gut was hanging over the table was telling me that my cholesterol was too high. But to be fair, he was right. I just thought maybe he was the wrong person to be saying that to me. But look, the NHS staff save lives. 1 million people a day apparently get NHS treatment. And the thing for me is, Steve, I think every single family, pretty much, has probably got one great NHS story and one absolute horror show. And the two kind of cancel each other out a little bit, don't they? How do you respond to people then when they say, oh, you know, they're all angels and, you know, we all need to go out and clap them and that we've got this religious service today where our Prime Minister and quite possibly the person who's about to be our Prime Minister are reading from the Bible about our NHS?
I find it nauseating, and I'll tell you why, because actually the NHS is completely broken. It's a right mess, isn't it? Look at the waiting list. Why are we actually celebrating it? And also, you know, I hear this all the time where people say, it's the envy of the world. No, it's not. No one around the world adopts it, as far as I know. So actually, the answer is no. But I actually think there's another thing. The performance management of people in the NHS is very lenient, very lenient. It's very rare you hear of people being sacked in the NHS. Compare that to the private sector, you've got two big different worlds. And I'm going to tell you something now that you probably don't know. I worked in the NHS for 5 years. And I'll tell you what, I was a pen pusher. I wouldn't have paid me in washers.
Right, fair enough. I think you've exposed something else there, though, which is a really big bugbear of mine. We do pay enough for our NHS. Now, it's a question of, is that money then distributed well enough, in my view? The answer to that clearly is no. You cannot have a workforce that is, by and large, pretty much all unhappy with their pay. I think the consultants can do one, by the way, because their average salary is something like 100 grand, and they're talking about going on strike. I'm sorry, but, you know...
I want to say something on that. I want to say something on that because I feel very strongly. Is when those people are going on strike and denying our public the treatment they desperately need, on those days, they can work in the private sector and earn a lot of money. That is a disgrace, an absolute national disgrace, and people should be outraged with it. And frankly, doctors and consultants, they're not badly off, are they? Have you ever known a poor doctor? Ever known a poor consultant? Yes, we pay for their brains, and that is important. But they get a great pension, they get great sickness entitlement, something that you would not see in the private sector.
Well, no, and we end up... Look, I do have support for nurses. I did get very, very agitated about nurses going on strike when it was things like cancer wards with children in it or intensive care and stuff like that. And I just thought, look, I'm sorry, I understand that you want more money, but I did think that was bang out of order. I think just morally. So that, that was my view on it. I got a bit of stick for that at the time, but that's where I'm at with it. OK, I think that's just my view. I'm not really going to apologise anymore for that. But when I look at the people who are towards the top end of the NHS as well, so these aren't the people who are at the coalface. These aren't the quotes-unquote angels who are at the bedside or intubating someone or slapping a defibrillator onto a bloke's chest as he has a cardiac arrest. A lot of these people are completely faceless. A lot of them have these ridiculous jobs, whether it's the head of diversity or whatever the heck it is. They're on six-figure salaries and the rest. And I just think, these people, they're classed as NHS workers. They're not angels.
No, we need to get rid of a lot of these bureaucrats. Listen, I used to work amongst them years ago, and I'll tell you what, they used to arrange a meeting, to have another meeting, to have another meeting, then write a report on the meeting, to have another meeting. It was absolute waffle on steroids, if that's the right phrase, and the money should be pumped into the medical areas of the NHS, absolutely. But I'm sorry, when it comes to those medical personnel as well, not all of them are angels. Many do, like I said at the top of this discussion, many do have a bad attitude, many do need an empathy course, many are obnoxious, and they need to realise, actually, who pays their salary.
Well, that's an interesting point.
You, the public.
It's an interesting point because the NHS medical negligence bill, and this is for NHS England, and I've got the stats here, which actually is quite staggering. £128.2 billion is set to be the amount which will be needed to settle NHS England's negligence claims. That's a 52% year-on-year increase. A lot of that is in the maternity sector as well, which is particularly devastating, I think, when we assume what the consequences there must have been. And, you know, when you look at it like that and you think, well, actually, you know, hang on a minute, is everyone who works in the NHS a hero?
They're not a hero. No, not at all. Many make mistakes. We all know that. We've seen the press reports on it as well. But I do come back to, as well, this issue around productivity and conduct of NHS personnel. When I'm talking about conduct, I'm talking about attitude, the ability to help people, the ability to talk to people in a courteous manner, the ability to actually find a solution for the person you're dealing with. And I'm sorry, whilst many do that really well in the NHS, we have, in my opinion, a real bulk of people that are absolutely useless. I would not pay them in washers.
Steve, thank you very much. It's an insightful.
Hang on, I want to tell you something. By the way, Patrick Christie, have you been nibbling on a chocolate cake?
What was I wonder what you said there. What was that? Have I eaten the NHS's birthday cake, Steve? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, listen. I just want to give you a little warning because we don't want you becoming a wobbly backsider again.
I know.
Right? So just be careful because you're looking very, very gorgeous at the moment. Very, 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 well, I won't say it at this time of the day, but you're looking great. So just watch what you're putting in your mouth.
I will, Steve. I've already decided I'm not going to eat anything else for the rest of the day, and I'll do a few press-ups and sit-ups when I get home. But thank you very, very much. Steve Miller there, not looking too bad yourself. TV personality, friend of the show, friend of the channel. Good lad. Right, OK, look, here's controversial stuff. But I thought we've spoken a lot about, you know, some of the good stuff the NHS does, a lot of the good stuff the NHS does. I just think it's a bit much to have a 75th birthday party, including a church ceremony today, that sees our Prime Minister, potentially the future Prime Minister, the current leader of the opposition, giving out a church reading. You've got someone who delivered the first vaccine outside of a clinical trial, carrying the George Cross through Westminster Abbey. The Archbishop of Canterbury's there. You know, it is a little bit much when you think about the idea that it probably does need radical reform. And that radical reform, by the way, may well bring with it increased pay for a lot of the members of staff in there, which I think we can agree is needed for the most part in a lot of areas of the NHS. And when you bracket it up as some kind of religious ceremony, it does make it seem perfect and untouchable, doesn't it? And that, I think, is the opposite of what we need. Steve made a good point there. If the NHS really is the envy of the world, then why is nobody else copying our system? More on this on our website, though, gbnews.com, the fastest-growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion, and all the latest breaking news. But now, as you may already know, GB News is campaigning to stop the UK becoming a cashless society. The campaign is called Don't Kill Cash, and it's already proving to be hugely popular. So far, more than 116,000 people have signed our petition. Loads of retailers are choosing to only accept card payments. Vulnerable people will be excluded and marginalised from society if this is allowed to happen. A massive 5.4 million adults still rely on cash, and it's used in 6 billion transactions every year. But a lot of vested interests are pushing for it to be permanently replaced by debit and credit cards, other electronic payments as well. We want the government to introduce legislation committing to protect the status of cash as legal tender and as a widely accepted means of payment until until at least 2050. We're asking you to sign our petition, make our voices heard. It's on our website, gbnews.com/cash, or if you've got a smartphone, use it to click on the QR code on your screen right now, and it will take you to the petition. Help GB News with our campaign and tell those authorities don't kill cash. But here is an example of exactly how big companies are trying to kill cash. And frankly as well, potentially jobs as well, by the way. But train companies are trying to close thousands of ticket offices. Now, as you might expect, Mick Lynch, off of the RMC, isn't happy about that. But this is good, because neither am I. And we have a rare point of agreement between myself and Mick Lynch. I am really looking forward to this conversation, actually. So when we come back, we've gone and got a bit of Mick Lynch. Great stuff. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel. Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. OK, so coming up a little bit later in the show, as Justin Welby once again criticises the illegal migration bill, I will ask if it's time for him and other religious leaders to keep their nose out on migration issues, or is it part of their job, frankly, to try to bestow a moral virtue onto all of us? And the National Health Service has been lauded, of course, as a cornerstone of national life. Many people think it's the best thing ever, really. It's its 75th birthday. But there are signs that it could be, well, showing its age a little bit. So we're going to be having a little look at all of that. But this is a good topic for us. So train companies have just announced proposals to close down hundreds of ticket offices across England. And that means that more and more people would have to rely on smartphones and apps to buy tickets. So it's cashless, basically. And this is one of the reasons why we have launched our GB News Don't Kill Cash campaign. Both consumer groups and disability campaigners, for that matter, have already voiced their concerns about the proposed closures. Now, this chap's name was floated about in a works meeting earlier on, and he was seen as some kind of pipe dream. There's no way that Mick Lynch will come on and talk. Well, here he is. It's the RMC General Secretary, Mick Lynch. Mick, it's great to have you on. Thank you very much. I think we might have found a rare point of agreement, which is that this is absolutely bonkers, and really, it's a real shame if these facilities are closed, no?
Well, it will be a real shame, and it's not just about ticket office closures, it's about the de-staffing of our railway, and the ticket office closure is a ruse for that. The way it works in this country is we have regulated ticket office opening hours, and that tells us how many ticket office staff should be there. What they're going to do in this campaign, which we're resisting obviously, and we hope disabled groups, passenger access groups, women's groups, and all sorts of people who are interested will join our campaign to respond to this consultation. They're hoping to get rid of all these regulations, and that means there will be no laws or barriers to them de-staffing all stations. Any station in the country can then be de-staffed, and they will do that. We've seen the documents today. That means that most stations will have no staff in attendance whatsoever. So that means if an elderly person or a person with disabilities or a person with visibility issues needs to buy a ticket, that will be a problem. But then navigating their way around the system, across onto platforms, onto the train, they could be without assistance. And indeed, what they want these people to rely on, Patrick, is that they'll then use an app to get. It's rather than having a friendly member of staff who's competent and knows what they're doing, they'll have to ring up a call centre or use an app. And if somebody's available, given the amount of job cuts they're putting through, they may get assistance if there's somebody in the area on a van or riding on a train themselves. So we are looking at compulsory redundancies of station staff right across the piece. We've been served with statutory redundancy notices today by most of the companies, and they are cutting more than 1,000 jobs that we believe out of the system. And that is an attack on what kind of railway we want. What we want is a friendly, secure environment where people can know if your granny wants to go on a train, they can get assistance, you can leave them there, they can get on with it. If your child needs to travel on a train on their own, that they can get friendly staff that they know are properly identified. And what will end up is with a mugger's paradise. The people will know that stations are not staffed are the muggers, the drug dealers, the antisocial, the people that want to take drugs or take drinks in our stations, because there'll be nobody there with the secure environment. Now, this is dehumanising the railway. It is. And it's exactly what we've been campaigning against. We were told we were scaremongering, and now it's revealed they are going to close every single ticket office on our network, and that will mean mass de-staffing and a very dehuman railway going forward.
No, exactly. I mean, this is actually, you've really well articulated a load of different issues all rolled into one here, right? And I mean, I can see this coming together in some kind of potent cocktail of disaster, which is someone, bless her, like my grandma, who tries her best but might not be the best with technology, goes to a train station thinking that she can get some cash out of her purse and meet someone and pay for a ticket. Then that can't happen. So then she's messing around with her phone, and then there's nobody there, and then a young lad decides he's going to nick her phone and probably her purse as well. There's no one for her to call. She can't get anywhere. You can just see it all coming together. And a lot of this does stem from, like you just said there, the dehumanisation of train facilities and presumably others like them, wanting them to go digital and, obviously, crucially to our campaign as well, to go cashless, which we certainly don't want. I've got to ask, would you then... I know that your primary focus, of course, is on workers' rights and all of that, as indeed it should be. But would you back our campaign to Don't Kill Cash? Because I think it does kind of tie into it a bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We don't want cash to go out. It becomes more and more difficult for people on low budgets, for instance, who use cash as a means of controlling their weekly and monthly spend. Because if you take a fixed amount of money and budget to that, it means you're in control to some extent of your life. And if you're just doing it on the card or doing it on some kind of tap method, you can quickly run out of control of your life. And of course, what these algorithms do on apps and websites is that they sell you the thing they want you to sell you. What a friendly professional train railway worker will do is maybe sell you the best ticket you can get. For instance, they might say to you, if you wait 10 minutes, mate, you'll get a much bigger discount. An app won't tell you that. And certainly a ticket vending machine, which is what they're asking us to use, will not say, well, stand to one side, there's an off-peak train coming in 10 minutes, and if you get that one or travel at this time or use this service, you'll get much better value. Sometimes that's a third or a quarter of the price of what the app or the algorithm is going to give you. So there's a whole series of things coming together, which I think makes the railway hostile. I want to see a vibrant railway that people can trust and rely on, that where they feel secure. You know, the poor old worker that's finishing a late shift on the NHS, which I just saw you talking about, at 11:30 at night, and has then got to trudge through a completely dehumanised railway or bus system without any human contact, is not the way we want to live. We want our public services to have a human face to them that we can rely on. And there's a whole amalgamation of issues. We've had loads of people contact us from women's groups who feel vulnerable travelling on their own. They want to make sure a guard's there. They want to make sure a station worker's there to escort them or just oversee the situation. And what getting rid of these regulations mean is there could be no one there. We've had this before, by the way, in the London area and on many stations where they've just been crime venues after a while. And be sure they will destaff every single train, every single station they can get away with in the pursuit of their ends, which is profit at the end of the day. And they're making very healthy profits out of the railway just now.
Mick, look, thank you very much. I really do appreciate you coming on. I really do appreciate you helping to help with our campaign as well, and raising a few seriously key issues there. And it does all roll into one, and it is important because there is definitely 100% a workers' rights issue here. Of course there is. There's a human element to this as well. There's a public safety bit on it. There's also just the pure ability to be able to pay in cash. And I do think you actually made a good point there, which was about this idea that if there is a human being there and you have the capacity to then pay in cash, there is actually a chance that might save you money. Because that's an angle on it I hadn't thought about, actually. If you are on one of these apps, then, what is the incentive of an algorithm to try to actually get you the best deal? So, look, there's a lot to it. Mick, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Take care. It's Mick Lynch there, who is the RMT General Secretary. Lots of fascinating points there. Lots of fascinating points. Look, get your views coming in. GBviews at GBnews.com. Loads more still to come between now and 6 p.m. As Justin Welby once again criticises the illegal migration bill, I will ask if it's time for him and other religious leaders to keep their nose out of immigration. But first, it is your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories this hour. A Red Arrow's fly past has taken place today in the skies over Edinburgh, concluding coronation celebrations in Scotland. Take a look. If you're listening on radio and you can't take a look, the skies emblazoned with red, white and blue as the Red Arrows made their way across the city. And earlier at St Giles Cathedral, King Charles was presented with the honours of Scotland, the country's crown jewels. There was also a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle before the royal procession. The event saw several protests, with Police Scotland confirming 2 women were arrested after they allegedly tried to climb over crowd barriers. Now, also in the news, the NHS has been honoured during a ceremony at Westminster Abbey today. Political leaders, along with members of the royal family, paid tribute to staff as they marked the health service's 75th anniversary. And that's as Labour warned the NHS will die out without further investment and modernisation. They say a record 7.4 million people are currently on waiting lists, with the government acknowledging that number could get worse before it gets better. And Wimbledon was disrupted today by Just Stop Oil protesters twice. One protester was arrested after confetti was thrown on Court 18, and that's after 2 other Just Stop Oil activists were detained for targeting the same court. Now, a jury has been told that Kevin Spacey grabbed a man like a cobra while making hardcore comments at a West End theatre. The Hollywood actor was described as smelling of booze when he allegedly grabbed the complainant. The 63-year-old is on trial, accused of sex offences against 4 men between 2001 and 2013. He denies all charges against him. And as you've been hearing, there's anger over plans which would see the closure of almost every railway station ticket office in England. The proposal, unveiled by the Rail Delivery Group, affects hundreds of stations, with facilities only expected to remain open at the busiest locations. Disability charities and unions are among those who voiced their concerns, saying it'll impact vulnerable people and lead to job losses. More on all those stories, head to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
And the numbers stacking up like this today. The pound buying you $1.2711 and €1.1702. The price of gold, £1,513.16 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed today at 7,442 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Here we go. It is debate time. Justin Welby has once again hit out at the government's illegal migration bill. In a letter to The Times, the Archbishop of Canterbury, along with Muslim, other Christian, Hindu, Jewish and Sikh religious leaders, wrote that Britain must have an asylum system based on justice and compassion. So, there's a couple of things to unpack here. The government says the illegal migration bill will help them tackle the small boats crisis. Obviously, that's what it's there for. But the bill has suffered 11 defeats in the House of Lords on Monday. Now, what the Archbishop Justin Welby wants to do as well is to create and commit to what he calls a long-term international refugee policy that, he's not really been more specific on that, but he says would uphold all of the moral virtues that we need. I've got to be honest, from where I'm sitting, we do have a long-term refugee policy, which is, of course, just to let them all in and then let them stay long-term. But we're going to have a discussion about all of this now and whether or not that religious leaders and figures should probably stay out of border control. I'm joined by the Anglican Bishop of the Christian Episcopal Church, Reverend Dr. Gavin Ashenden. It's quite the introduction, that, I must say. And human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan as well. Thank you very much, both of you. I think in the current context of what we're talking about, it's probably only fair that I go to the religious chap first. So we'll go to you, Gavin. Do you think that religious figures like the Archbishop of Canterbury should maybe stay out of our border control discussion, or at least stop floating additional policy, maybe?
Everyone's entitled to have a view about the political future of this country, and there are two views when it comes to migration. One is the view that you want to have compassion on people seeking a better life, and the other view is that you have a duty to people whose country it is and who need some form of social stability and social cohesion. I'm talking from Normandy in France at the moment, and France has been overwhelmed by social conflagration produced by rioters from people who were immigrants, and the difficulties that's caused French society have just been enormous. The reason that Justin Welby shouldn't talk about it is because he has responsibility to Anglicans who represent both sides of the political spectrum, and he can't pursue one political solution without betraying people for whom he's supposed to have a spiritual and pastoral brief on the other. So he in particular is not entitled to pursue one view of this without giving some expression to the other. And actually it's very bad form. It's very bad policy for an archbishop not to understand that the role he's supposed to play in the nation is wider than having a political brief.
Well, I do, as I understand it anyway, believe that congregations are dwindling a little bit when it comes to the Anglican Church in this country, and potentially it's because when they see the Archbishop stand up and get involved in something so overtly like that actually a lot of people in England disagree with, maybe that turns them off going to church. But I'll bring you in now, human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan. Shoaib, thank you very much. Do you think that it is the right thing to do to have the religious element, i.e. if you want to be considered a holy person, you have to believe in open borders? I mean, we already have human rights. You dine out on them. Why do we need the religious lot getting involved?
Because I think that is what religion is. That is what Christianity is. That is what, I mean, I hesitate to give any particular, declaration on how Christ would have reacted. But the point is, that's what Islam is. That is what the great religions do. They talk about morality. They talk about humanitarianism. They talk about humanity. And if we are going to have these religious leaders, many of them who are paid from public funds, and, many of whom people pay, then I think these are exactly the issues that they need to be a part of. If, for instance, Justin Welby is going to be part of the Queen's funeral, or when the monarch is being coronated, then why not? I mean, when he thinks that something is happening and the government is acting in a way that is inhumane or reprehensible or immoral, then I think that is what religion is. Otherwise, I don't see the point. What is the point of religious leaders if when people are being made to suffer, they won't speak out? That is the exact point of, that is the reason for their existence.
There is that argument, Dr. Gavin. There is that argument that they should look at whatever their interpretation of whatever their particular religious book is, and when they are asked a political question, they should voice that view. I mean, do you think that Jesus would want open borders?
One of the things that Jesus did is he didn't talk about current political problems because he wanted us to concentrate on the salvation of our souls and getting to heaven. He was invited all the time to comment on political Roman issues, and he always avoided it. But the trouble with the argument you just heard is it's only half the argument. It's presuming that all compassion belongs to people who are in favour of open migration and open borders. It pays no attention whatsoever to the needs of people settled in communities who suffered deeply from social cohesion. There was a Frenchman who had his arm chopped off as he tried to stop rioters destroying his property in France. France is on a knife edge at the moment. Are you not allowed to have any compassion for the people who live in France, whose societies are being trashed by this level of riot and immigration? Of course you are. It's absolute nonsense to say that humanitarian concerns belong to only one side and they are the privilege of open borders and uncontrolled immigration. I would say the opposite is true. It's a profoundly destabilizing policy which causes an immense misery and potential instability to settled countries throughout the world, and it needs to be controlled in order to have a proper balance between the interests of immigrants and the interests of settled communities.
I suppose it's one thing, Shoaib, saying, look, I think that Jesus or whatever particular religious figures that the other denominations have signed up to believe in would have wanted this. It's another thing to then start floating additional policy on top of that. So the Archbishop's job in the House of Lords is to look at government policy, scrutinise it, try to see if there are any particular holes in it, and then maybe knock it back or wave it through. But what he's now doing is floating something else entirely, which is we should be part of a wider international refugee community with a long-term plan. And I just wonder whether or not potentially there he's abusing the cloth to just put forward his own political agenda. If he wanted to do that, he could stand for election, produce a manifesto and see if anyone wants to vote for him, couldn't he?
So I'll just address a few quick points. So firstly, in terms of what what was just said about compassion, not being the domain of just one school of thought or one political party or so on. The point is that if that's the argument we're having, that we think what the government is doing is compassionate, then that's a completely different argument from saying that Justin Welby should not have a view, or if he has a view, he should not express it. I think that's a completely different debate. But secondly, in terms of what you just said, in terms of Justin Welby, but I think the reason we or people like him have to do that is because otherwise, like you've heard for decades, whenever we oppose any government policy, what they say as well, you have no solution either. Even though all of us have solutions and we have been advocating for them and suggesting them, the point is if he hadn't made that suggestion, people would say, well, you have no ideas, you don't know what to do, so why are you criticizing the government? And the point is he has come up with a humane, balanced, compassionate, practical solution. And now that he has, now we're saying, well, stay out of politics. Why are you suggesting policy? So the point is, people like him who are opposing the government just can't win. Are they supposed to suggest alternatives or not?
OK, it's interesting because, OK, whilst I obviously disagree with what his alternative is, especially in the context of what we're already doing, I suppose at least he has actually suggested something, and I am sick and tired of people just standing up in the House of Commons, especially in the House of Commons, not just in the House of Lords, and absolutely slating everything. Gavin, just one more quick one with you, if that's all right, Gavin, which is as a Christian, are you slightly concerned about the head of the Church of England, which I appreciate is not your sect of Christianity, I suppose, the head of the Church of England being so comfortable welcoming in so many people who, I dare say it, are not Christian? Or does that not bother you?
I was very distressed when the Syrian refugees came to Europe, and it became Home Office policy to let in tiny proportions of Christians, almost none, and almost universally Muslims. The demographics are that by 2050, in both France and England, there will be more Muslims than any other group. And that strikes me as being a profoundly destabilizing and problematic future. It's set in the demographics already. I think for the Archbishop of Canterbury to make it worse or to intensify it without any public debate, because the media won't talk about it, is absolutely off limits. Okay. But for him to propose making it more intense seems to me to be a dereliction of responsibility without proper public discussion.
Final word to you on that show. I'll let you respond.
Yeah, I completely obviously support the Archbishop here. I think it's right he speaks out about this. I think it's right that other religious leaders speak about that. Is their role. That is what I think they are there for. Obviously, if we disagree with what they're saying, we think what they're suggesting is in fact inhumane and not compassionate, then that's an argument we can have. But to somehow be seeking to silence them, I think it's completely wrong.
OK, look, both of you, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. I hope both of you have a fascinating discussion. Anglican Bishop of the Christian Episcopal Church, I should have rehearsed that, Reverend Dr. Gavin Ashton and human rights lawyer Shove Khan as well. Thank you very much, both of you. Right, OK, get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com. Now, today marks 75 years of the National Health Service, with royals, politicians, staff and patients all expressing their pride and gratitude. But is this the case for everyone? I will be talking to somebody who has had, well, not the best experience of the NHS. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, the National Health Service has been lauded as a cornerstone of national life grief, on its 75th birthday, but there are signs that its age might be catching up with it, and it might need some intensive care. Joining me now is cancer patient Rhiannon Carpio, who has actually gone abroad to have treatment because she felt let down by the NHS, or at least that's what it says on my autocue here, Rhiannon. So I'm going to hand it over to you. And whilst the NHS does do a heck of a lot of people, I've also just been sent something by someone who apparently has been placed on a 4-year waiting list for treatment on the NHS. Just explain your situation, if that's OK, as, of course, we celebrate the NHS at 75.
So in August last year, I went into emergency hospital with a suspected appendicitis. Ultrasounds and CT scans showed that actually I had bowel cancer at stage 4.
God.
Which was a total shock because I had no symptoms, I had no warning, there was no indication that there was something that kind of wrong with me, so that was a real shock.
Well, I can imagine, Rhiannon. I mean, it was quite shocking just to hear that. I was trying to put myself in your situation for a second there, thinking how I'd react, and not well, I think, is the response there. So then what happened in terms of treatment?
So the consultants were fantastic. They said, you're very young, I just turned 39. They said, we will do absolutely everything we can to get this out of you. Long and short, I had 6 sessions of chemotherapy, which was relatively successful. It wasn't successful enough for me to have surgery, and surgery is what I would need in order to be cured. So, unfortunately, after 6 sessions of chemotherapy, I was then told that we would have to move on to palliative care, which is end-of-life care, which is something that I and my family were not able to accept.
OK, and so you went abroad, and what's the situation now then? And where are you?
And so right now you might be able to see I'm at Frankfurt Airport. I've just had, I'm having a number of treatments. I had done some research. I'd found some wonderful people on Instagram who were having successful treatments that are either not funded by the NHS or not available on the NHS, which is terrible, because these treatments are, it's too early to say exactly what my outcome will be, but I can tell you that a lot of people in my position with my particular mutation would not be very well 12 months after diagnosis. When my oncologist told me that I couldn't have surgery, they were not able to give me much of a prognosis past 12 months, because they don't know how I would react. So I've been lucky enough to meet a fantastic oncologist in Germany through my own research. And like I said, I'm having a variety of treatments. I'm having something called dendritic cells, which is not available in the UK. I'm having a chemo, transarterial chemo procedure, which is available in the UK. It is available on the NHS, but it's only available in very, very specific scenarios. So I'm not eligible for that treatment on the NHS in the UK.
Despite the fact that
but I am able to pay privately.
Yeah, I mean, despite the fact that you obviously, were really, in a terrible state, obviously, in terms of you needed it. So I think the point I'm very clumsily trying to make there. You really, really needed that, and it was. Well, look, very, very quickly, because we've not got long, Rhiannon, and I'm sorry, I appreciate your time, but what do you make of people who say that the NHS is the envy of the world?
Well, we're not the envy of the world. There is a very powerful drug called Avastin, which is funded in a lot of countries fund Avastin through their national health care. It's not available on the NHS. It's not funded. So people are having to pay up to £1,000 per infusion to get this privately in the UK. When it should be available. Treatments such as TACE, the dendritic cell vaccines that I'm having, it's too early to say what my outcome will be, but I can tell you that I am very, very well. My tumour markers are going down. I've got shrinkage on my tumours. I'm in a much better position than I believe I would have been had I relied only on NHS care.
Well, Rhiannon, thank you. That is a fantastically uplifting thing to end on, Rhiannon. Much appreciated. And good luck with the rest of your treatment, and hopefully you make a full recovery. I'm sure you will. Rhiannon Capierre there, who's currently abroad at the moment trying to, well, essentially get cured. But there we go. Right, thank you very much, everybody who's been joining me. Jubes & Co. comes up next. I'll be back on your screens for Farage. And by the way, it's a massive Farage show this evening. Stay tuned.
I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. It is going to get warmer again towards the end of the week, but for the rest of today, a cool breeze, bringing some sunshine, but also bringing plenty of showers. More than a cool breeze, though, across the Netherlands today. This deep low pressure was named Storm Polly by the German Weather Service, bringing some wet and windy and wild conditions to the Netherlands and Denmark. We are dominated by low pressure, but it's nowhere near as intense, just bringing a sprinkling of showers through this evening. Many places will be dry. The showers will keep going across parts of North Wales and northern Scotland through the nights, but many of us will just have a dry night with clear spells. Might turn a little misty in one or two spots, certainly turning a bit chilly. Temperatures down to single figures in rural spots, double digits in most towns and cities. Will start at about 10 to 12 Celsius. On Thursday morning, we'll also start with quite a bit of sunshine. Any early morning mist will clear away. There'll still be one or two scattered showers, mostly across West Wales, northwest England, the odd one across the southwest and Scotland too. But we are looking at wetter weather coming in across Northern Ireland, so turning quite soggy and blustery here by the end of the day. Quite a cool feel here too. For many elsewhere, though, we'll see sunny spells and temperatures a bit higher than today, getting widely into the low 20s, 23, 24 across the southeast. That wet and windy weather, though, will spread its way up the western side of Scotland. So a few showers likely during the evening over North and West Wales, northwest England. Quite some heavy rain pushing into Scotland through the night and as we head into Friday. But all the while, most of England will stay dry and clear, and that's going to lead into a hot and sunny one on Friday across these central and eastern parts. In contrast, Scotland, Northern Ireland, lots of cloud with further outbreaks of rain, particularly for the west of Northern Ireland. Some showers at times over northwest England as well, but I think those showers tending to...
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're